Alrighty. Oh, that's why. There we go. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay. It looks like we have everyone here. Okay, so we'll call the order right at 1:30. And I'll recognize that we're conducting our business today on the territories of principally the Neutronos people, and specifically in the Alberni Valley, the Hupachis and the Tishat First Nations. And that we don't just recognize that we're conducting our business on our territory, but we appreciate it as well, vocally, publicly. So for everyone in attendance, we are conducting, probably this will be our last fully online meeting. And it is being conducted via Zoom, but we're broadcasting it on YouTube, which you can access through either the YouTube channel for the ACRD or the ACRD website. If you have any comments or questions, we don't monitor the chat on either YouTube or if you're an attendee on Zoom, but you can send an email to responses@acrd.bc.ca. Now, with that, we need to start and recognize with a moment of silence for Captain Rob Favell, who passed away on Canada Day. He was a 28-year member of the Beaver Creek Volunteer Fire Department. And I'd like to ask, I think Charlie's here.
I am.
If he would say a few words. And then, yeah, please go ahead. Thank you.
Beaver Creek Volunteer Fire Department Captain Rob Favell lost his battle with cancer early on July 1st of 2021. He was in West Coast General Hospital with his family by his side. Rob was 62 years old at his passing, had served at the Beaver Creek Volunteer Fire Department for 28 years. As a chief, Rob was a dream volunteer. He never said no and was always available when a task needed doing. He was a gentle giant with an easy smile, and he genuinely cared for those in his charge. He will be greatly missed. While Rob's passing was not designated a line of duty death, the Beaver Creek Volunteer Fire Department is planning a full honor service at the family's request at a date early in September yet to be finalized. Rest easy, Rob. We've got it from here.
Thank you, Charlie. So I would like to call for a moment of silence, starting now. Thank you. I'm wondering if the vice chair or anyone who knew Rob would like to have anything to say.
Chair Jackson, the 28 years of service that Rob gave to the Beaver Creek is a phenomenal gift. Certainly, somebody like him leaves a big hole in our community, and the citizens of Beaver Creek, myself, my family, certainly recognize his service and his life, and he will be missed. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else have any words? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the agenda. We have before us a lengthy agenda of 12 pages. I'm wondering if there's anything else that would like to be added to the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of anything, any late items for the meeting today.
I did have one, and it depends on whether or not if Director Beckett wants to give a report on a visit he received our MLA not too long ago. Would you mind doing that in member reports under item J?
Happy to do that, sir.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's it. Could we have a motion, please? Thank you, Director Roberts, seconded by Director McNabb. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. All right, that brings us to declarations. Does anyone have any declarations of conflict of interest or appearance of conflict of interest or any gifts exceeding a certain amount?
Yes, Chair Jack, I do. For number 9C regarding Dale McAdee property.
9C, Director Bodner. Okay, so if I forget, if someone could just kick me digitally and just remind us to put Diane in the waiting room for the proceeding, and that would be great.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the adoption of minutes. First item is the Board of Directors meeting for June 23rd, 2021. All right, Director Cote, move adoption, seconded by Director Shannon. Any comments, errors, or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. All right, next up is the Personnel Committee meeting dated for the same day, June 23rd, 2021. Thank you, Director McNabb, seconded by, thank you, Director Bodner. Okay, any comments or questions, errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. All right, the Alberni Valley Regional Airport Advisory Committee meeting dated July 13th, 2021. Anyone move adoption? Thank you, Director Paulson. Do we have seconder? Thank you, Director Cote. Comments? All right, seeing none. All those in favor? Okay, motion carried. All right, and finally, the Alberni Valley and Bamfield Services Committee meeting dated July 21st, 2021. Thank you, Director McNabb. Seconded by, thank you, Director Bodner. Any comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to petitions, delegations, and presentations. We have a pair of them today. First up is Inspector Eric Rochette, officer in charge of the RCMP detachment. 10-minute max. If we hit that during a presentation, I'll just hit pause and ask the directors to keep going. That doesn't count questions and answers at all. So please take it away, Inspector.
Thank you and good afternoon. So today I'm just going to go over the second quarter, the RCMP crime stats for April till June 2021. So during that period, we received 512 calls related to the regional district out of 3,233 calls for service. The total number of criminal offenses did go up by 18% for the quarter compared to the same quarter last year. Property crime has remained the same compared to last year, but violent crime are up by 32%. And I'll break everything down here in a few minutes. If we go back to calls for service, you're going to note that all calls have gone up for different factors. Obviously, some of the restrictions for COVID are gone now, so there's way more people walking around and more people traveling. So I'm sure that had an impact on the calls for service. But so if you look at this quarter, we had 512 calls compared to 450 last year. So it's an increase of about 12 to 15%. When I was talking earlier about violent crime, it did go up from 22 to 29, and I'm going to break it down here a little bit further. Property crime, status quo, from 33 to 32, so it did go down by 1. Other criminal code, 17 to 29. So again, I'll discuss a bit further in details in a minute as far as, because it's almost did go up by almost 100%, 90%. So drug offenses 4 to 0, and total criminal code That's what I mentioned earlier, to go up by 18% from 76 to 90 for the same quarter as last year. And criminal traffic to go down by 14 to 7. Now, if you break down the violent crime, because I mentioned earlier that we see a spike to about 32%. Assaults did go up from 8 to 12 compared to the same quarter. Assault with a weapon or assault causing bodily harm, we see a reduction from 3 to 1. Harassment, a slight increase from 2 to 3. Robbery stays the same. We have none. Sex offenses, which is sex assault or sexual interference. There's a long list of crimes related to sex offenses. They go from 1 to 2. The biggest change that we've seen, and I think that's why we have seen a huge impact here as far as the percentage of calls for service, is the number of uttering threats, calls for service. They go from 5 to 11, so it more than doubled. And on the positive side, domestic violence, which we've seen a huge spike, especially during the COVID, when during the restrictions. Last quarter was 9, and then we did go back to 4, which is more historically in line with what we've seen for the last 4 or 5 years. Property crime, which I mentioned earlier, it basically stayed status quo compared to the same quarter as last year, and you'll see what the numbers are. Auto theft, vehicle theft went from 2 to 1. Bike theft was 0. Break and enter in business was at 0. Break and enter residence, we did go from 1 to 2. Break and enter other, which is basically usually a shed or garage. We had no report this quarter. Mischief to property was vandalism, basically. Numbers quite similar as previous years. 13 did go down to 11. Theft was status quo, 5 to 6. Possession of stolen property, 0 to 2. Those 2 files are related to vehicle being pulled over, several stolen items in the vehicles. One of them was actually a stolen vehicle as well, so those represented 2 stolen property files. Shoplifting 1 to 0, and theft from vehicles stay basically the same from 4 to 3. Now, other criminal code, and I mentioned earlier that we've seen a spike of approximately 18 or so %. Is the main reason it's caused disturbance. As you can see, historically, we're usually around 3 to 4 a quarter, and this quarter we did go up to 13. So it basically tripled as far as the calls for service when it comes to cause disturbance. We've seen a spike as well of breach of probation. This has been in line with what we've done historically, of making sure that our chronic offenders do comply with the probation orders, and we work closely with the probation office, making sure that we stay on top of that, and we do regular curfew checks. And if the person's not there, that's when we charge with probation. So we've seen from 1 to 5, and we've seen a reduction though for breach of bail conditions from 9 to 6. And under provincial statute, right, intoxicated public, so we did go from 1 to 4. So as you can see, the numbers have gone up slightly, mainly when you look at cause disturbance and uttering threats. As far as calls for service did go up by about 15% or so. And like I mentioned earlier, I think there's an aspect about the changes from COVID. There's way more people walking around and discussing with other detachment commander. They've seen the same thing. There's a spike for sure in calls for service. And if there's more calls for service, there's a spike as well as different crime being committed. And so on the other side of things too, I think it's important to mention, we've been fully engaged with the Ferry Creek protest. I've had to send at least 1 officer, if not 2, every week since it started a couple months ago, and it's probably going to be ongoing for at least until the end of September. Because of the protests, all the detachment on Vancouver Island, we haven't been asked to send officers to the forest fires, but unfortunately, all the assistance we were receiving from a detachment in Lower Mainland or Southeast District is obviously gone. So because now they need to focus on the forest fires. So I've been asked, and we've all been asked on Vancouver Island to look at our resources and plan ahead and making sure we have officers available to attend now to fill the gaps at the protests. So like for next week, I have to send 2 officers there. So that's going to have a huge impact, obviously, in our capacity of being a little bit more proactive than reactive. I have to keep in mind as well as, you know, the normal numbers of officers that are on pat leave or currently injured or on long-term sick leave, as well as keeping in mind that I have to make sure there's a work-life balance there. So giving leave to the officers, especially after the last year where basically there was no leave with COVID. So trying to keep that in mind. So this is a little bit of a struggle that I have to manage, obviously myself and the senior management team here. So on a good news though, the operations supervisor, which is a position here, has been vacant for 28 months. A new officer his first day is going to be August 16th. So it's going to be a new staff sergeant there coming from Whitehorse. And as soon as for the next board meeting, I'll be present, and hopefully if it's in person, I'll be able to introduce him to all of you. If not, we'll do it via Zoom, but that's good. That's good news for me for sure. And as well as senior management, just to alleviate some of the pressure. And he's a great addition. He's an officer that's worked basically everywhere in the country as well as overseas. So I'm really looking forward to start working with him. And like I mentioned, I'll be here August 16th for his first day. So now I'm open to questions.
Thank you. Any comments or questions, please? Director Cote, please go ahead, and then Director Bodner.
Thank you. Let's see. Thank you, Inspector Roche. Just like to know if there's patrols ongoing out at Sprout Lake and have you connected to the Sprout Lake Marine Patrol at all this summer? Thank you.
So because of what I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, so far we've done 1 patrol on the lake for basic 4 or 5 hours. We had another patrol scheduled for later this week. Unfortunately, I can't staff it because I have to send officers to Fairy Creek. So to answer your question, it's been extremely limited as far as our presence on the lake, unfortunately, this year. We're going to try to do a little bit better in August. We'll see what happens. But I still have seasonal policing money available. It's just a question of finding members to actually be on the boat. That's the struggle right now. But so that's where we're at in regards to that.
Follow-up, Dr. Cote?
Yes, please. Have you connected with the Sprout Lake Marine Patrol?
Personally, I haven't. I know that officers have stopped by at the ramps to talk to some of them, but that's as far as our contact has been with them at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Director Bodner?
Thank you. And I would like to bring up my concern about the hole in the wall and the people using and parking on the road that goes down to the Mosaic gate. There are signs up there that says fire lane, no parking, but so many people are parking there, and they're running over the signs. We even had a tourist bus that got stuck down there and had to turn around and stop traffic and whatnot. I'm just wondering if it'd be possible for somebody could patrol that perhaps on the weekends when it is really hard to get in and out, and people are going in there with their trucks and campers that have permission to go down there to the range, to the gun range, and there's been times when they haven't even been able to get down there because the road has been blocked. And it is a fire lane. It's the only way to get in and out from that gun range. Thank you.
So I know we've been, this has been an ongoing issue for a long, long time, obviously. But I know we've been in touch with, I think the regional district as well as Ministry of Transportation, trying to find solution in regards to that. As far as, I know we've talked to Mosaic as well, trying to get their security to assist us, because the reality is, I can say that we'll try to be there and assist, but to say that we will be there to assist, I can't make that promise. It's just like there's more urgent matters that frontline officers have to deal with, and but obviously, if we get calls for service in regards to something ongoing, and as you mentioned, like a tourist bus that needs assistance, obviously we'll do everything to help. But as far as finding a long-term solution, we're open for ideas, because it's been an ongoing issue and doesn't seem to be any feasible solution, long-term solution anyway, to that problem.
Thank you. Yes, we're still working on it. Thank you very much then.
No, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Cole.
Hi, thank you. Quick question about, we've had these problems in the past. We have a whole working group, et cetera, and meetings about the illegal camping or the extra camping that's happening out on West Main and such. So something has evolved this year, and I've been to a couple of calls recently with the ambulance service out. It's no longer down West Main, and everybody is just parked on the highway or along the highway on the exits, and any sort of outcroppings or sort of pullover lane spaces where you could pull over and check your tires, and then the entrance to West Main and other old logging turnoffs off the highway between here and Port Alberni. I'm wondering if that's Crown land, or if that's Mosaic land, or if that's highways, or when we're talking about the sides of the highway, and is the same rule apply that you can be there for 2 weeks? Do we know who? Yeah, I'm just curious if I should walk down to the station here and talk to them about, I just haven't had time. I didn't know if perhaps you had that information.
Well, I can for sure, on the side of the highway, it's Ministry of Transportation. So it is not like it's an easement basically. So it's not Mosaic or Forestry. So I know, because I've been in some of the meetings, that the Ministry of Transportation is part of the group. And so it's kind of a new thing, because like last year wasn't an issue as far as people staying on the side of the road, because they get reported right away, and you can't stay there. So if we're contacted, usually the ministry sends someone to ask people to move along. If it becomes an issue, then they would call us, and we would attend, or the highway patrol unit would probably be in a better position to attend as far as, but I'm not aware of any requests that we have received here in Port Alberni to assist MOT in regards to that. In regards to vehicle being parked on the side of the road. I think there's a bit of a tolerance by the ministry as far as, like, if someone's there one day, they kind of let it be. But if it's an ongoing usually give about a 48-hour notice. And we do the same thing for abandoned vehicle. Like if a vehicle is abandoned on the side of the road, we put tape around it, and usually 72 hours, and the vehicle has to be moved. So, but the short answer is, yeah, it's an easement. So basically it belongs to the Ministry of Transportation, and they're the one dealing with those concerns. And if they can, they call us.
Okay, thank you. There's somewhere between 50 and 100 vehicles on the sides of the road between the junction to Tofino Euclid and the turnoff to Tocourt. So, okay. And and they're parked, like meant to stay there, sort of thing.
Yeah, no, so that should be tolerated. So.
Okay. Thank you for that. Are there any other comments or questions? Dr. Paulson, are you just playing with your pen, or did you have a comment? Okay. All right. All right. On behalf of the board, I'd like to, Director Roberts, please go ahead.
Just a quick question through the chair to Inspector Rocher. Is there a dividing line between your detachment and Euclid? Is it Sutton Pass, or is there something else that we should know about?
It is basically the top of the pass. That is the the cutoff.
Thanks very much for that.
You're welcome.
Okay. Are there any other comments, questions? Okay. Seeing none, on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you for your presentation, Inspector Rochette, and welcome you back next time.
Thanks. I just want to take 30 seconds. I don't know if I see Douglas' name on the screen. I don't know if he's doing other things, but
Yes, sir.
Doug, I just want to say it's been a pleasure working with you for the last 14 months, and I wish you all the best in Nanaimo. And if you're ever around here, don't hesitate to stop by and say hi.
Thank you very much, Eric. The sentiments are reciprocal, and I wish you the very best as well in this fantastic community. Take care.
Okay, take care, Doug. Thank you.
All righty, thank you for that. Okay, so that brings us to the next item, which is a presentation regarding the blue economy strategy and coastal strategy in general. We have the executive director of the West Coast Aquatic, and that is Tawny Lim. Hello and thank you. Please go ahead.
Hello, and thank you very much, Chair, and hello to all of the directors. My name is Tawny Lim. I'm the Executive Director with West Coast Aquatic, and pleased to come to you today from Sashot and Hippachesset territory here in Port Alberni. I've got just a few slides and then would love to engage in questions with the board. So just by way of a short history, for some of those of you who may not be familiar with us as an organization, West Coast Aquatic has a history going back about 20 years here on the west coast of Vancouver Island. And really the genesis of the organization started before us with the signing of the interim measures agreement in Clayoquot Sound with the Central Region Board back in 1994. And this was really a landmark agreement between the Central Region First Nations, the province, and the federal government around sharing decision-making authority. So bringing those decisions closest to those who are affected by it. And that agreement was for the terrestrial landscape, and the vision had been to extend that into the marine space. And in 2002, again, New Chalnoth, together with the regional district here, the federal and provincial government were successful in bringing that vision to a reality through the creation of what was then known as the Aquatic Management Board. And again, the vision here was shared decision-making, bringing that decision-making here as opposed to in the broader Pacific region of Vancouver or even further abroad in Ottawa. So when we think about West Coast Aquatic, there's really been three components that some of you may have engaged with in the past. One is the governance board, or what was known as the Aquatic Management Board. This is where West Coast Aquatic started. And this is a non-legal entity that looks at policy issues affecting West Coast of Vancouver Island as a whole, and includes all levels of government, together with commercial, sport and Indigenous fishers, marine transportation, tourism, aquaculture, environment, processing, forestry, and others. And again, the intent was shared decision-making. And I emphasize intent because we will talk about where we're really at today. Because this is a non-legal entity, the Management Association, which is the legal entity that I head up, was formed so that employees could be engaged, contracts could be entered into, and we sit as a neutral body, neutral facilitators who focus on increasing collaboration in natural resource management. And the third entity was the West Coast Aquatic Stewardship Association. And this was a charitable organization that focused on advocacy and conservation, mostly here in the SOMAS. And their activities were around restoration and the Alberni Aquarium. And that association was dissolved in 2000, earlier this year, with the aquarium assets being turned over to a new nonprofit. So the governance board in the past started building the coastal strategy which was to really guide the activities, a vision and the objectives. From there, they went into marine spatial planning, much like setting an official community plan for a city, but in the marine space. We've been engaged with southern resident killer whales and their conservation and protection. The Pacific Salmon Treaty, which reduced Chinook catch for Area G trawlers and trying to bring compensation to them. And now we are engaging, after 10 years of the coastal strategy, a refresh. And I'll also talk to you in a moment about DFO's blue economy strategy. So how all these kind of pieces fit together is that as the management association, we serve as the technical secretariat to assist the work of the governance board. In addition to that, we're very active here on the West Coast, facilitating the salmon roundtables, another forum of bringing local decision-making into local communities. Those roundtables are now working on a Chinook rebuilding strategy for the West Coast. And further abroad, province-wide, we're also involved in area-based aquaculture management. Again, another form of management that brings decision-making more locally, but for aquaculture. We're involved in the Integrated Harvest Planning Committee and bringing a refresh to that so that it acknowledges the needs of Indigenous nations. And broadly, our work focuses on building relationships and helping relationship development amongst groups that haven't typically worked together, but are recognizing that need for collaboration. So one of the focuses for today is looking at a refresh of the governance board. It was envisioned as shared decision-making, but the federal government, DFO specifically, pulled back from that several years ago. And that's been a source of frustration for many, that vision of shared decision-making hasn't come to pass. Where the governance board is at now is redirecting its focus to say, what are those things that we can achieve? Where are those areas where you agree that there's an issue and I agree that there's an issue, and we collectively want to bring our authorities to the table to work together? So the governance board, I think, is coming through a new genesis around that. And one of the tools that we'll be using to do that is also a refresh of the coastal strategy. This was an early product of the board with a vision and mission and objectives, ecologically, economically, and social for the west coast of Vancouver Island, that had been formed through interviews of over 700 individuals and organizations on the coast. Our leading questions here for people over the next number of months will be, what do we want to work on together that individually we can't achieve? And ultimately, how do we create conditions here on the coast that allow people, communities, and the environment to flourish? So we're going to be doing a review of activities of other groups. What are the other visions of organizations on the West Coast? What are their plans and priorities? And then starting a series of community engagements, whether it is open houses, targeted workshops, or engagements such as this, however the ACRD wishes to be involved, to find out what the priorities are and where our work should be directed. We will refresh the strategy based on that, and then determine what are the structures that are needed to bring that implementation forward. And that will come back to the governance board. For example, do we need to update the terms of reference and how it operates, its scope? And are there people that are not yet at the table that need to be brought in? A final piece that I'd like to bring forward today, and we've had some conversation prior to this with a few of the members of the regional district, and that is a new strategy that DFO is initiating called the Blue Economy Strategy. And as they describe it, the priority here is to create jobs in coastal communities while ensuring our oceans remain healthy. There will be aspects of a strategy created that include tourism and technology, transportation and energy, aquaculture and fisheries. Many of our partners and organizations here on the West Coast submitted into this strategy, for example, Cascadia Seaweed and the Sport Fishing Advisory Board, with particular ideas that that strategy could include. As West Coast Aquatic, we wanted to bring forward the concept that in order to bring this kind of strategy to fruition, there would need to be that localized decision making and that collaboration, and that groups such as the West Coast Aquatic Governance Board could serve a role there. So there really isn't a lot left to say about that strategy. The consultation period has ended. We'll be waiting for DFO to release the strategy, and we're sure that, or hopeful that funding will come with that. And as we learn more, we're committed to bring that to the regional district to see how the partners here at the table wish to participate. So with that, I do wish to acknowledge the work of Tony Bennett, who was a director on the governance board for a number of years and sat as one of the co-chairs, and we were grateful for his participation. And welcome aboard Tom Steer and Kel Roberts as the alternative. And want to really thank the regional district, not just for its participation through its directors, but also through grants and aid. We're grateful for your support and want to learn more about how we can continue to engage the regional district and be of service to yourselves and partners throughout the region. So thank you for that.
That was exactly 10 minutes.
I know.
Okay, that's perfect. All right, well, let's open it up for comment. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Dr. Steer, please go ahead.
All right, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tony, very much for the presentation. And I did want to acknowledge Tony Bennett's participation on the board. And I've spoken to him recently, and he has been fortunately very forthcoming with information regarding. I did have one quick question around, and as you pointed out in the discussions around in the DFO participation in the decision-making process. And there was obvious frustration around that. And I'm wondering in the new present administration with DFO, have you seen, or is there any indication that there would be a slight opening in that door, possibly to share in more of that decision-making process where those frustrations were lying?
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks so much for the question, Tom, because this really is sort of the crux of it. I think I do see an opening. Certainly at this point in time, DFO cannot do anything that fetters the decision-making authority of the minister, full stop. That said, there are more and more collaborative processes, even if they are advisory in nature. If we look at the roundtables, for example, they're considered advisory, but where all parties agree on a course of action, for example, closing an area to fishing, DFO is accepting that recommendation from the fishers. So it's not actual decision making, but on the ground in many senses it is. I think our current environment, when we think of the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples and BC's DRIPA Act, when we see the reconciliation agreements that are being signed with nations, those types of agreements are setting the path for shared decision making. And it's always been the guidance that we are looking to our New Channel partners. Where is it that they see the need to be working collaboratively with others? What are those issues? And should New Channel come through an agreement with DFO that brought more of that decision-making power here to the coast, and New Channel identified a multi-party need through something like the governance board, we're ready to work with New Channels to do that. So I think the time is now And certainly there's movement. And if there was any time to be moving towards that, it is now. That being said, instead of waiting for that to happen, there's still a lot of other things that we could be working on collectively that will have benefit for the communities on the coast.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just had a quick follow-up, slightly. The West Coast Committee might be, and I'm just thinking of those opportunities within the Coastal Strategy Refresh. There might be an opportunity at our next to be put, might have you on that agenda to maybe, they might be a little closer to the ground in terms of the input that they might be able to give and then report back to the ACRD. So I might extend that invitation to you to maybe at our next West Coast meeting to have a sit down chat with us if the opportunity arises for you.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Invitation when it comes accepted, whether it's through any of the committees, some of your individual organizations and businesses that you people also work for, or just as individual directors. The door is open. Pick up the phone in any way that folks wish to be engaged. We're happy to do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Director Roberts, please go ahead.
Through the chair, thanks very much, Tawny. Really appreciated your input on and the information that you've passed on to us. Our next West Coast Committee meeting is August the 24th. And I'm not exactly sure where that's going to be yet, but we will let you know for sure through staff, and appreciate it again. Thanks very much.
Great. It's open on the calendar. Thanks so much. Look forward to more information. Thanks.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions?
It's Wilfred here. Apologies for my camera not working. I'm experiencing a little bit of technical difficulties here, so it's just my voice. Thank you, Tawny, for coming and doing your presentation. I just have one thought question. Are you reaching out to the Treaty First Nations in the area, or are you individually, or are you reaching out to the Monmouth Treaty Society as a whole and starting there as West Coast Aquatic?
Seeking input and direction. We are happy to meet with each of the Monmouth Nations individually, the fishing committee, whatever is appropriate.
Okay, excellent. I'll reach out to you offline and I'll seek some advice and yeah, we'll definitely get together. Thank you.
Great. Very much appreciate that, Wilf.
Great. Okay. I'm not seeing any more comments. On behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you for your presentation. And yeah, it's always good to get an update from West Coast Aquatic. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Alrighty, so that brings us to item 6, which is correspondence for action. So we have one item here, and it is a request for a letter of support in regards to Shot's First Nations Green and Inclusive Community Buildings Fund application. So this is a discussion that was had with the between Tishot and the ACRD, and there was an official request in for a letter of support. I'm not certain there's much else to say. Director McNabb, please go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to move that the Albany-Clay Clark Regional District Board of Directors forward a letter to the Tishat First Nation supporting their application to the Green and Inclusive Community Building Fund to assist in replacing the 2 remaining Alberni Indian residential school buildings.
Right, and seconded by Director Roberts. All right. Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, that brings us into correspondence for information. Would anyone like to pull anything out? Okay. If there's anything, if there isn't anything, if we would, there is a motion to accept all of the correspondence for information. Dr. Shannon, or are you just moving? Yep, and seconded by Dr. Beckett. Okay, Dr. Cote, do you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. I would like to identify the correspondence from Chris Alemany. Let's Ride, Make Public Transit BC-wide a UBCM resolution. So I'm wondering, has this resolution been made, or like some more information on it, please? Or if it's a request.
I believe that the item here is going to already be put forward by another organizer or another community. It's a letter of request to urge supporting this resolution and working with other areas to have it. So I think it's going to be put forward. I believe Let's Ride is like an organ, like a group of people who are working together on this specifically with leaders within local government and local communities. So I would expect to see this on the UBCM resolution.
Okay, I'm just hoping to get more information on it.
That is something we can ask for.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, the resolutions handbook will be distributed in due course just before the UBCM conference. And so we'll be able to see whether it's in there or not. And then, of course, the directors in attending as delegates can decide how to vote on that at the time. And but of course, it is too late now to submit further resolutions to UBCM. So I presume that this is just essentially encouragement to support it at the conference.
I think so. And Chris used to be on council, so he's well aware that we're past the time for proposing a resolution. So it is very much likely just a request for support. So we'll see it from one of the communities. Are there any other items for discussion? Seeing none, it has been moved and seconded. So all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, that brings us into request for decisions and bylaws. So first up is item 8A, which is in regards to board and committee meetings for in-person / hybrid and providing for amendments to the procedures bylaw. So Wendy, if you wouldn't mind giving us an overview, that would be appreciated.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. So the Board of Directors has resolved to continue holding board and committee meetings and public hearings electronically until the end of August 2021. And we are authorized to do so under Minister Order 1 M192. As part of the Step 3 COVID Restart Plan, the province is encouraging local governments to start working towards getting back to normal operations. As the pandemic eases, this includes holding in-person board, committee, and public hearings. The province recently announced changes to the Community Charter and the Local Government Act that are going to provide permanent authorities for local governments to hold, conduct regular and board and committee meetings if they so wish. Electronically, a bylaw is required for that. This provincial amendment will come into effect on September 29th. If this is something the board wishes to allow, having electronic open board and committee meetings, we will need to do an amendment to the ACRD procedures bylaw. And this could not be done until after the legislation changes. Staff are recommending that the Board of Directors resolve to instruct staff to prepare for returning to in-person hybrid board meetings in September 2021. This allows staff a bit more time to make upgrades into the boardroom to allow our video equipment to record and live stream board meetings and committee meetings. As well, instruct staff to undertake a review of the regional district's procedures bylaw to allow for electronic meetings. And of course, this is following the provincial statute amendments at the end of September. And finally, to investigate options for returning to in-person public hearings following amendments to the Local Government Act. And if there's any questions, I'm pleased to answer them.
Okay, so we do have 3 separate recommended motions that cover off each of those steps. And I think if there are any comments or questions, please go ahead. Dr. Cote, did you have a comment?
Yes, I think this is a great positive step going into the future. Having the option to connect in remotely, I think is a really positive movement. We have done a couple of remote opportunities over the past few years for directors to call in either on phone or via Zoom or however it was at the time. But I think that moving forward, making this a permanent option is very beneficial for our regional district.
Mhm.
And I'm willing to make the motion if start the motions.
Yeah, you
Okay,
can-
I'll move that the ACRD Board of Directors instruct staff to prepare for returning to in-person hybrid board and committee meetings in September 2021.
do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Johnson. So just on the commentary generally, I do agree with that sentiment, especially given the kind of geography of our regional district. I think there are certain instances, especially during bad weather or the perpetual work on the highway, that the West Coast members might benefit from being able to have the option available here and there. So as long as we can get a good system for actually recording the meetings in such a way that it's not tragic in regards to not being able to see who's talking and not being able to hear who's saying what in the boardroom, that's my number one concern when it comes to all this. But the in-person and hybrids, I think we're going to go pretty hell-bent for leather on personal meetings for the first little bit, just to see each other once more. But once the weather starts to turn and snow starts to fall, climate change notwithstanding, I think it's something that will be on the table for all of us. Okay, with that in mind, Dr. Cole, please go ahead.
I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but I also just want to add that although I'm very much looking forward to seeing everybody in person, I think with the rise of variants and the things that are starting to pick up now, that although we have these lovely orders that we can move forward doing, a little bit of me is pessimistic back here, thinking we could have to recoil a little bit for a while, but that's just.
I didn't want to say that out loud, but yeah, especially with the Olympics potentially being an incubator, but yeah, we'll see. Any further comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, and Dr. Cote, would you like to continue with the second?
I'll move that the ACRD Board of Directors instruct staff to initiate a review of the ACRD's procedural bylaws to allow for electronic board and committee meetings and bring forward an amending bylaw for consideration by the Board of Directors in October 2021, following the provincial regulation amendments for electronic meetings that come into force on September 29th, 2021.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Johnson. Any further comment? Seeing none. All those in favor? Motion carried.
And I'll move that the ACRD Board of Directors instruct planning staff to investigate options for returning to in-person public hearings and further, following amendments to the Local Government Act to allow for electronic public hearings, staff to bring back options to permanently allow for the option of hybrid or electric public hearings.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Shannon. Any further comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Yeah, that's definitely motion carried. Okay, thank you for that. That brings us to the item B, which is the Personnel Committee Terms of Reference for 2021. Please go ahead, Dirk.
So
Did you want me to speak quickly? Oh, sorry.
Please go ahead, Director McNabb.
Sorry. I'd move that the Alberni-Clayquat Regional District Board of Directors approve the amended terms of reference for the Personnel Committee for 2021 as presented.
Dr. Cole, do you have this? That's a second or a comment? It's a second. Okay. Okay. Any further comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to the compensation policy review and amendment for exempt employees 2021. Please go ahead, Director Holmes, Douglas Holmes.
Mr. Chair, when the compensation consultant came and provided her recommendation to the Board of Directors, the policy was originally written out before she got engaged, and the policy at that time called for a 3-step. Her recommendation was a 5-step. The board adopted it in that way, and it's been administered as a 5-step program. So we've made that modification. The rest of it is just housekeeping, essentially to modernize a little bit of language and to clarify in a couple of pieces, and be happy to take any questions with respect to that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Or motions? Okay. Director Steer, please go ahead.
I'll make the motion that the Alberni-Clackwood Regional District Board of Directors adopt the amended exempt compensation policy as presented.
Here, do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Johnson. Any comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Okay, motion carried. Alrighty, that brings us to item D, which is the Declarations of Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, the draft action plan consultation submission.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for information, the minister has extended the comment period to the middle of September, but notwithstanding that, I thought it was important to express how what a positive step that number 1.13, so the inclusion of non-treaty nations on regional district boards is expected to be. Certainly the board has been supporting that process through my participation on the working group with the two ministries, as well as the Central Coast Regional District. We had a brief meeting this morning in that regard, and certainly the inclusion of this work in the draft action plan for the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act certainly provides more impetus to get active on this, and we look forward to that work in the future. So again, the recommendation is to write a letter to support and applaud this action. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are there any comments or questions or motions? Thank you, Director Steer. Go ahead.
I'll make the motion if that's appropriate, that the Board of Directors submit a letter to the Honorable Marie Rankin, Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation, and the Honorable Josie Osborne, Minister of Municipal Affairs, communicating the board's support for Action 1.13, support inclusive regional governance by advancing Indigenous participation in regional district boards of the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act draft action plan.
We have a second. Thank you, Director Cote. Any comments? Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to comment that this, in fact, is a very important movement, and I'm going for a walk with the minister as soon as this meeting is over, and this is one of the topics of our discussion. And I just wanted to reiterate, and I don't want to say specifically in our area, but there are very key players in our area in a lot of these large decision-making processes that with a much more active, inclusive voice in those, I think is critically important for everybody in our region to move forward. So thank you very much, Mr. Holmes, for the work. And I know how much you have put into this, and I very much appreciate how much you've done on this particular file.
Yes, definitely. It's good to see this coming onto the action plan. Then it'll be monitoring how it moves through the system, so to speak, and that's definitely the proof in the pudding at that point. Okay, with that, all those in favor? All opposed? Ooh, everything changed. Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the grant and aid application for the Drag Race Association. Oh, hi, Terry. It moved again. There we go.
So the Drag Racing Association is not holding their traditional Thunder in the Valley event this year due to COVID, but they are hosting an event that they're calling a charity cruise coming up. And they have provided a letter requesting that the grant and aid be released for that purpose, because when we had passed the grant and aid in the budget sessions this year, it was contingent on them hosting an event in 2021. So just looking for some more direction on this one.
Okay. There we go. Director Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. So could we get some clarification then, because we made the stipulation that the money would be released. If they held the drag race, can we modify it at this point?
So the motion actually read that subject to an event being held in 2021. So it didn't specifically state that it had to be the Thunder in the Valley event. And that was where staff wasn't feeling completely comfortable. That was necessarily what your direction was and why we brought it back to you to confirm. But it didn't indicate a Thunder in the Valley drag race event specifically.
Director Roberts and then Director Shannon.
Yeah, through the chair. I think I'd like a little more information. I know time is short, but how is this $5,000 going to support the charity cruise? I'm not quite clear on what that's all about.
My understanding is they are going to have some costs related to the flaggers and just the flow of traffic through town, and some other items like they had to get it added onto their insurance and those sort of ideas. I didn't ask if it would be up to $5,000. I don't know if there's a direct correlation, and maybe we could make that connection for them. But that's all I think staff know at this point.
Okay, Director Shannon, please go ahead.
Thank you. From what I read in there is they're asking for money for what Terry just mentioned, just to be able to run the event, not at a loss. And from what I understand, it's to have some kind of event so they don't get lost or forgotten about as things get going again, because we're still in COVID. So I'm happy to move this motion because I still think it's great that they want to do something, and it's something for a couple good causes that they would like to donate all the profits to. If the board's more comfortable, I don't know how you reword it to just maybe they just get reimbursed for expenses for this amount, or versus just giving them the 5,000. I don't know if we have options there, but otherwise, I'm happy to support this.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to make that motion now? We can just put it on the floor.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Roberts. Everyone. Okay, after that, we have... That's my wife yelling at my toddler. So we have Director Cote, and then Director Minions, and then Director McNabb.
Were you asking for me to speak? I'll pass.
Yeah. Okay. I thought you had a follow-up. I wasn't sure.
I'm supportive of this.
Okay. Okay. That brings us to Director Minions and then Director McNabb.
Thank you. I was just going to say I'm supportive of this as well. I think that it's been a very challenging couple of years or year and a half to be able to host events. Our community is really missing, any type of initiative like this. And although this isn't exactly, I think, what the Drag Race Society wanted to see, and I'm sure a lot of people in the community will be disappointed to not have more of a formal event as well. I think this is the best effort that can kind of be made in on a short timeline. So I think it's a good initiative to support. Thank you.
So there is a entry fee for this cruise. It's $30 a car. The proceeds from this are going to go to the West Coast General Hospital Emergency Ward fundraiser and the Tishat Band for their monument commemorating the students. So this isn't really any different than what we did in Bamfield with the music festival. The proceeds from that were going to the Victoria General Hospital. Give me a hand there with that. I can't remember exactly which hospital it was going to, but the proceeds from this should be fairly significant. So I'd certainly like to see that split up between these two events or there's two fundraisers. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
I can't remember. It is one of the two Victoria hospitals, though. Okay. Any further comments? Okay, that in mind, all those in favor? Motion carried. All right, item F, the BC Active Transportation Infrastructure Planning Grant Program for Banfield. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the Banfield Community Affairs Society is looking to put together doing a transportation network plan for Banfield, and there's grants available for doing this network planning. They have reached out to the ACRD to ask us to assist them because it requires a registered municipality in order to apply for the grant. There will be staff time involved for us to assist them in this, but the Community Affairs Society is looking to do all of the work to prepare the grant and then to engage a consultant and basically do all of the work. So we are just the overseer because we qualify for being a grant conduit.
Thank you for that. Director Beckett.
Yes, thank you. I really do appreciate the support that staff gave Community Affairs in guiding them with respect to this application, especially given the fact that it takes a 10,000-foot view of the needs in the community, as opposed to a reactive approach to, one simple project. So I am fully supportive of this and would like to make the motion that the Board of Directors authorize staff to submit an application on behalf of the Banfield Community Affairs Society for the British Columbia Active Transportation Network Planning Grant Program for the 2021/2022 intake.
Thank you. And seconded by Director Roberts. Okay, any comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Oh, motion carried. Sorry, Director Roberts, did you have a comment? No? Okay. That brings us to item G, which is the Active Transportation Infrastructure Grant Program, different program, for the West Coast Multi-Use Path. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, similar program, different streams. So this is for the infrastructure portion of this. And staff are recommending that we apply for the $500,000 to support the multi-use path portion that we are working on. We have, of course, brought this to the board many times as we try to collect enough money to complete this project. We have, as a reminder, we have phase one for ICE-T funding. We have put some community works funding into this. And if we are successful with this grant as well, we will still not have enough money, but we are getting there. So we are looking at different options on how we can move forward. If we're successful with this grant, we might actually do a phased approach where we develop the path and do everything except pave it. Because we would be able to do that if we had this funding available, and then we would continue to seek out grants, or we could look at our community works funding. We can look at other ways to really make this, to finish this project. So we're doing our best on that and working on the other details, which is finalizing the tenure for this land and some other things. So Michael's been working very hard on trying to finish them up.
Okay, Director Roberts, and then Director Cote.
Yes, through the chair to Jenny, thank you very much for all the hard work you've done on this. I just want to say that this, the development of this West Coast multi-use path is really a key element for the West Coast as far as tourism and biking and hiking and cycling throughout the area. Much appreciated. And with that, I'd like to make that recommendation that the Board of Directors authorize staff to submit an application for the West Coast Multi-Use Path Project through the BC Active Transportation Infrastructure Grant Program for the 2021/2022 intake for the maximum funding of $500,000.
You do a second? Okay. Yeah, everyone from the West Coast, including has seconded. I'll put Director Coots. Any further comments? I think I have Director Cote next. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm thinking that the total amount of this was 900,000. I can't remember what the total was. Just want to say that this is a really worthwhile project I drove past the trail. I went to Tofino last weekend, and it's amazing. All I wanted to do was get a bike and start riding. Didn't see a lot of people on the trail at this point. I think that it's not quite completed, or they're working on a section of it. But it is an amazing addition, and compliments to the West Coast for that new addition, and really support it. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Cote. Director Roberts.
Yeah, through the chair to Director Cote. Yes, thanks for that. I know we receive updates from the parks, national parks, with regards to that trail. Parts of it are open now, but there's still is construction ongoing. So please, if you have an opportunity to go out there and see it, as Director Cote has done, it's really going to be worthwhile. It'll be so nice for everybody to travel. You know, once you hit the information booth, you can travel to Cluid or Tofino and drive through the park. It's fantastic. So, and if you need a bike, Director Cote will loan you one. Cheers.
Is it e-bike?
Okay, are there any further comments? All right, seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to item H, which is a request for decision regarding the replacement of the Echo Aquatic Fitness Center. Mr. Holmes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The AV&B committee went deep into this conversation, and the consensus was, and the resolutions that came from the committee are to get the consultants in place and to get started on getting the information prepared so it can get to the public conversation, and a preliminary group of participants be agreed upon at this time for the purposes of investigating the service prior to the bylaws, and be pleased to answer any questions, Mr. Chair, beyond that.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions? Director Cote, please go ahead, and then Director Paulson.
Thank you. This is a long, extended process that we've been through so far. The city has been invested in this process for quite a number of years, which brings me to one of the motions recalls the building off the City of Port Alberni's 2011 report. I have difficulty following along with that. I think that it's outdated, and it had no real participation as to what the rural communities would like to see. I think that we could use it, but the term building off of, I think that is a little bit suggestive that we could use that. And I don't really particularly think that it's going to be a whole lot of value with the amount of years that it's gone by and the lack of participation from the rural areas. And I would like to see something also in here that talks about splitting the facility and the operations costs so that we can, oh, sorry, somebody's beeping. So that we can also take a look at that as well through the process. That's all I have right now. Thanks.
Okay, so with that, I have Mr. Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment on Director Cote's, what she had to say just briefly. As the person who wrote that recommendation for the committee, in retrospect, the purpose that it was put there was really to be public facing, to let the public know that the work that was done so far wouldn't just be thrown away. But I think Director Cote is completely correct in that I think one or perhaps two of the models that were looked at previously contemplated using, continuing to use the existing tanks, and they're 55 years old now. So I don't think that there's anybody who'd recommend doing that. So it's really just to say, let's not start from zero, but let's understand that there's work been done, but the likelihood of that, of an awful lot of that work being recycled isn't practical given the nature of it. So from staff's perspective, there needs to be professionals engaged in terms of people who are specialized in the design and operation of these, to give the public the proper information to really participate and gather in a really robust conversation to give the elected officials the information they need to proceed. And so, so if that part was left off, I mean, either way, the same thing's going to happen. Those materials are going to be passed with the context of their age and what was probably intended at the time, and the professionals who do design and operate these things would come up with independent recommendations for consideration. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Next up, I have Dr. Paulson.
Yeah, thank you very much. I know, Douglas, that your intent was certainly not to take that 2011 report verbatim, but there probably are tidbits in that report. There were public meetings held between 2005 and 2011 when that report came out. But certainly the business model for aquatic centers has changed drastically between 2011 and 2021, in particular with their new design opportunities for revenue generation and hopefully offsetting operating costs. But for me, I'm just thrilled that we are actually to the point where we will engage a consultant that will start the process, and will start the community engagement process, and move the project forward. And there's many questions and much speculation in our community about cost. There's wild speculation of costs. We don't know that yet. And also there's much discussion about how you pay for it and parcel taxes. And I would hope that when it comes time to have that discussion, once the cost is determined, that we in this day and age, 2021, will come up with a suitable solution that will be somewhat palatable to everybody. And it might even be a combo burger of home improvements and maybe parcel tax, who knows? But that's way down the line to be determined. And there's way too much dialogue going on in the community right now over things that we just don't know yet. And I think that the consultant and the public process will help get us to that. And I'm pleased that we're at this point. Thank you for listening. And that was a long, windy statement, wasn't it? Thank you.
I think it's good to introduce the concept of that we're going to have those discussions down the line. And before we get a bunch of area directors stating, I'd like to preempt it by underlining the fact that this is a process that we're going to be engaging in that is strictly for the purpose of investigating the service. So it does look like it can be interpreted as a commitment to the project itself or a certain permutation. It is not, and we don't need to hear it from every director saying that. That this process is going to be one in which folks will engage with one another and the consultant and everyone else involved and investigate what can happen, how it might happen, and then finally at some point arrive at some sort of solution or not. But we do have to have a guided discussion in regards to this. And that's what these motions reflect, that this is a process of discussion for investigating the service pretty much only. And so I just want to reiterate that so we don't have to belabor that point anymore. I would note, however, that there are 3 separate motions, and I think they should probably be covered off separately as well. so we can open it up for comment or motions. Director McNabb.
Man, here I was going to filibuster that point. Don't get too easy. So anyhow, I'd move the first motion that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors identify participants of the Alberni Valley Aquatic Facility proposed service as the City of Port Alberni, Electoral Area B, Beaufort, Electoral Area D, Sprout Lake, Electoral Area E, Beaver Creek, and Electoral Area F, Cherry Creek, for the purpose of investigating the service underlined prior to the drafting of the service establishing bylaw.
There's the appropriate level of gravity. Thank you, Director McNabb. And seconded by Director Paulson. Any further comments? Director Shannon, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to touch base and highlight that, because I know I've seen a lot of comments online, like, why are we doing another study? Why are we investigating this again? And I just want to highlight that because this time there are rural area directors that get input and our communities get input. And I just wanted to highlight that. So there's some more understanding perhaps behind that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that deserves reiteration. I think that there's more engagement in a wider sense. I mean, the chief counselor Tashat was at the meeting, as well as Hopacha said as well. So this is a completely different group, completely different set of values. And I don't want to curse everyone by saying I look forward to seeing what happens, but I kind of look forward to seeing how this all works. Yeah, if there are any other comments, or we can just go straight to the all in favor, all opposed. Okay. Could we do all in favor again? Not a lot of people move their hands. All in favor. Okay. All opposed. Okay. Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, the next one looks like it's the direction of staff to work on it. Could we have someone move that? Thank you, Director Paulson. Do we have a second? Thank you, Director Bodner. Any comments? Director McNabb, please go ahead.
Just with regards to Director Cote's comments on the building off of piece, and I think we might be better with referring to.
Yeah, or like
with reference to.
Including but not limited to, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean the words, like she said, don't really work. Thanks.
Yeah, so let's just put including but not limited to, if that's okay, Douglas, or something like that. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, these motions belong to the board, so I don't want to get into insert myself into the debate at all. But I think that staff has heard very clearly sort of the recognition of the age of these things. And so I would offer as well, just striking that last bit off at the end of it. There's no question that that staff would work with the consultants, show them the work that would be done, et cetera. But I think that based on how it was received, I think it bears contemplating just eliminating it.
So just a period after facility then. Okay. That's amenable to everyone. Dr. Shannon, you had your hand up?
I was just going to suggest what Doug just said.
Okay. Okay, with that in mind, that's if that's okay with Directors Paulson and Bodner, we can just move on. Yeah. Okay, so all those in favor? Okay, motion carried. Okay, and the third motion. Moved by Director Paulson, seconded by Dr. McNabb. Just for our sake, it's that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors direct staff to undertake the process to secure a consultant or consultants to proceed with community engagement. Dr. McNabb, please go ahead.
So just like to comment that the funding for that was put into the 2021 budget. So all of the areas and the city of Port Alberni have already been taxed for that. So we're not looking for a new expense.
Good. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Okay, that brings us to item I, which is the Banfield Community Hall ground lease agreement. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Banfield Community Hall Society is looking to construct a new community hall near the on Grappler Road in Centennial Park. They have secured $1 million in grant funding and have additional funds in reserve to complete all of the construction, as well as to maintain a reserve of just over $200,000 for the community hall. They're looking to get a 99-year lease for those lands, which are the ACRD lands. However, the community hall itself will be owned and operated by the Community Hall Society. Staff are recommending that we move forward with this, but consult with the Parks Commission that operates the Centennial Park and those lands. There is a small risk if they default. The operating costs per year are just under $40,000 a year, which they believe they can cover through fundraising and events and just recovery through fees. There's a small risk that if they're not able to generate that revenue, they may default, and then the asset would become the responsibility of the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District. However, that is a relatively low risk.
Thank you. Dr. Beckett, would you like to move that? Yeah. Do we have a seconder?
I would like to move that and just mention that we've been without a community hall for some time now, many years, and credit to the committee that has worked so hard to fundraise over the years, including to secure a very significant grant. Thanks to staff for working with them and for your support. So I'd like to make the motion that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors authorize the CAO to enter a ground lease for the term of 99 years with the Banfield Community Hall Society for an annual rent of $10 following consultation with the Banfield Community Parks Commission.
Thank you. And seconded by everyone. I'll put Dr. Roberts. Okay, any further comments? Dr. Cote.
Thank you. I fully support this and congratulate Banfield for their community stepping up and their society bringing this forward. I know that Sprout Lake totally relies on our community hall. It's a great asset to the regional district for a connection to the committee and to the community. And congratulate them and fully support this. Thanks.
Great. Okay, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to item J, which is the Sprout Lake Volunteer Fire Department decommissioning Fire Hall 2. Charlie, welcome back, and please go ahead.
Yeah, this item comes directly out of the Sprout Lake Volunteer Fire Department Asset Management Plan and the budgeting process of the past year. And out of those, it clearly identified that the fire department was very stressed as far as finding funding to support what they have in place. So staff looked at what's there with the 3-hall model and basically came down to number 3 fire hall on the highway overlaps the areas served by number 2 hall, making number 2 hall redundant. Removing number 2 hall, decommissioning it, means we do not have to replace an apparatus immediately, as the engine there required replacement right now, saving approximately $750,000 to $950,000. The repositioning of water tenders and the manpower from that hall to the 2 remaining halls helps us meet the requirements set out by the Fire Engine Survey and maintaining what we have there. So really, we're not looking at losing any protection status, but saving some money in the long run and easier to manage. And myself and Chief Can are here to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you for that. Are there any comments or questions or motions? Please go ahead, Dr. Roberts.
Yeah, hi, through the chair to Charlie. Thanks very much. I would assume that the rationale behind decommissioning the hall and utilizing it as a training center is as part of the report that was submitted. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes. Staff had the idea, and we hired Dave Mitchell and Associates to come in and do the report survey to make sure we weren't doing the wrong thing, and their report did support our thoughts on it.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Thanks for that.
Okay. Mike, thanks for sitting on the meeting for so long. Did you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I just thanks Charlie and everybody for taking part in this and helping us move forward and meeting our obligations for FUS. Thanks.
All right. Okay. Could we get someone to move the motion, please? Or thank you, Director Cote.
Thanks. First, I'd just like to say that change is not easy. We are one fire department with 3 halls, so nothing much has changed with the fire department. The members are all the same. The service is still the same. It's just a change in with Hall 2. So I'd like to make the recommendation that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors approve the Sprout Lake Fire Department Hall Assessment Report prepared by Dave Mitchell and Associates Limited, and direct staff to continue to meet or exceed the dwelling protection grade rating from the fire underwriters, thereby not affecting coverage that the residential fire protection rating is based, and move to a 2-hall response model with the decommissioning of Sprout Lake Volunteer Fire Department Hall number 2 on Faber Road for fire responses.
Thank you. And seconded by Director Roberts. Any further comments? Please go ahead, Director Roberts.
Yeah, through the chair, just, you know, I did an in-depth read on this, and I just want to say that this report by Dave Mitchell and Associates is a good one. We went through a very similar process in Coquitlam, and we downsized from 5 halls down to 3. And the coverage is enough that it does meet the fire underwriter survey, and it has to do with insurance and water support, clearly, for the community. So yeah, good on you for that, and congratulations. Cheers.
Okay. With that in mind, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay. Motion carried. All right. Thank you, Charlie, and thank you, Mike. Okay, so that brings us to item K, which is short-term implementation of strategic plan items. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as the board is aware, we recently completed the strategic plan for the Alberni Valley Regional Airport. We also were successful in receiving $180,000 in grant funding for COVID-related response for regional airports. So staff sat down and looked at the excellent list of recommendations in the strategic plan and came up with a short-term implementation plan to move forward with some of the easier to achieve objectives that we think we can get done in the next year and a bit or a couple of years. And we recommended to the advisory committee that we move forward with that. The recommendation was supported. And in order to do this and start doing the work in 2021, we will need a financial plan amendment to receive the money that for the grant, so that we've got that on the books, but then also to increase our costs for, I think it's $60,000 for the 2021 year. And then subsequent years, we will incorporate into our financial plan through the next financial planning process.
I'd like to make the recommendation, if I might. You're muted.
Sorry, I keep talking while being muted. So do we have a seconder? And then we'll have, thank you, Director Johnson. And then Director Paulson, did you have a comment? No? Did you have an opening comment, Director Cote?
Just thank you to staff, because it was amazing that they came forward so quickly with some recommendations, and the Alberni Valley Regional Airport Committee was very happy to receive those and we're moving forward in a very positive way. Our airport is such a wonderful offering to the community, and to be able to bring it up to what its potential is important. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Okay. With that, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to item L, which is the bylaw regarding parking fees and airport maintenance charges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And also another thing that came out of the vision and strategic plan is it really highlighted the need for the for AVRA to become more financially self-sustaining and to really look at what our rates are. And so similar to what we've done at the Long Beach Airport recently is that we did kind of look at our lease rates and our revenues, and we've decided at the Long Beach Airport to put in an airport maintenance charge. This is a charge nominal for all of the leaseholders, and it gets collected and then put towards infrastructure improvements, water, sewer, roads, things like that, very core infrastructure. And when we looked at the Alberni Valley Regional Airport, we had similar thoughts. We do know that our neighboring airports, of those, we do have the lowest lease rates at AVRA, and so that we do want to do a market assessment. We don't think that now is a good time for that, but we have put that on the books for 2022, so starting in January. And until then, we recommend that we do implement an airport maintenance charge. We brought that to the advisory committee. Everyone was very supportive of that. We also want to implement parking fees, which we are able to track with our current on-site caretaker. Landing fees is not something that is feasible at this time because we just don't have scheduled service, and we don't have oversight of flights coming and going at the airport. However, we think that these changes will be helpful, and so we've established a airport fee bylaw that we are recommending be passed, which will hopefully generate approximately $9,000 annually that will go into infrastructure improvements which are needed at the Alberni Valley Regional Airport.
Okay. So we have a series of motions that have first, second, third reading and adoption. We could just say first reading, second reading, and so on and so forth. Dr. Cote.
Thank you. I will move first reading.
All right, thank you, Dr. Cote. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. Paulson. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Okay, motion carried.
I'll move second reading, bylaw R1035.
Thank you, Dr. Cote, and seconded by, I missed who put their hand up. Thank you, Dr. Paulson. Okay, comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And motion carried. And third reading?
I'll move third reading.
Thank you, Dr. Cote. Seconded by Dr. Paulson. Comments? All those in favor? Okay, motion carried.
And I will move adoption of bylaw R1035.
Seconded by Dr. Paulson. Okay, all those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to item M, which is expansion of the Beaver Creek Fire Protection Service area. Please go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I can speak to this report. So the Regional District received a sufficient petition from property owners at 8150 Cameron Road and 8200 Cameron Road, which are within the Beaufort electoral area, requesting to amend the boundaries of the Beaver Creek Volunteer Fire Department service area to include their properties within the service area. The properties are defined on the map, which is in your agenda package attached to the bylaw for consideration by the board. The fire department has confirmed they have the ability to provide these properties with fire protection and suppression coverage. So therefore, regional district staff are recommending that the board of directors consider 3 readings to bylaw E1052-5 to include these properties within the service area. If the board does give it 3 readings, the next step will to get consent from 2/3 of the participants of the service area. And the participants of the service area are Beaver Creek, Cherry Creek, and Beaufort. If that consent is obtained, we will bring the bylaw back for consideration of adoption at the August board meeting. And if there's any questions, I'm pleased to answer them. And Charlie Starrett can also speak to this report. there's any questions.
How do you obtain the permission? Does it have to be in a meeting, or do you just get it by written response?
Yes, it's written consent that I obtained from the participants, so the directors of the areas.
Okay, so as before, we can just say first, second, and third reading. Dr. McNabb.
So I'd just like to say that this type of inclusion is pretty problematic. There are no fire what am I? I missed the word here. The hookups for hydrants. There are no hydrants in this area at all. The closest one is probably 2.5, 3 kilometers from this residence. So if we have an occurrence there, I mean, our effectiveness is going to be really quite minimal. Beaver Creek Fire Hall does not have a tanker truck. Our trucks all have small abilities to carry water, like 1,500 gallons. But you know, so, I mean, the last fire we had on Cameron Road, we were running, you know, 300 or 400 feet of hose from the nearest hydrant, and you know, when we get these requests that are out of our service area and out of our district, it really makes me think that we need some support from other districts to provide this type of service in their area. You know, the support of a tanker truck that belonged to Beaufort, that was utilized for this type of purpose in Beaver Creek itself. Very seldom would we ever need a tanker truck because of our water system. So it's, you know, it's just not rubber stamp as far as I'm concerned. I think there needs to be a plan. There isn't a plan. And, you know, it's really something that these 3 areas need to think about. And they need to look at options for funding equipment that's required to go back and forth. So anyhow, I'll move the first motion that the Alberni Claycourt Regional District Board of Directors give first readings to bylaw E1052-5 Beaver Creek Fire Protection Service Area Amendment 2021.
Seconded by Director Shannon. Any further comments? Director Shannon, please go ahead.
Thank you. Just a question to Director McNabb, or maybe Charlie could chime in here, because of the boundary on the map, because it is right, the one property looks to be partway up the boundary and the other one right there. When we talk about water and how far away the water is, I mean, there's a lot of properties already in that situation. Is that further discussion of bringing more water up there and having the people in there fund that? Or just some questions on like how this works from Charlie, again, John, because it's so close to the boundary right there. Or maybe that's one of the big, deep discussions that John referred to. Thank you.
Charlie, if you wanted to, go ahead.
Sure. From the fire department's perspective, we have some areas that do not have hydrant protection. The fire department would certainly like to have water in all the areas and water lines, but that's very expensive also. These properties on the edge of the boundary are problematic, as John says, but they are on the edge of the boundary. So for the fire department to say, yeah, we're not going across the street because the property on one side of the street is and one on the other side is out, is problematic for the department. It's within range of doing it, and with the support of our AMA groups, we can provide the protection there without undue difficulty. These properties are probably the last 2 that would meet the FUS requirements, the fire underrated survey requirements, as far as distance goes. Beyond these properties, we're out of range, and the return for the property owners becomes minimal to none other than they'll put the fire out and they won't get that coverage. But yeah, it's Water would be nice, but we can do it without it. We do carry enough and we have the support of the other fire departments. That answers your question.
All right, thank you. I have Director Roberts.
Through the chair to Charlie, because of the distance on these properties that wish to be included, perhaps the property owners might be willing to keep a water storage tank on site for use to further enhance the water supply for that community, as they do in other communities, including Arrington, where I live. There are large water tanks situated in various parts of the community to help support fire protection.
Yeah, there is in fact a large storage tank on an adjacent property, but from the fire department's perspective, they can't depend on a private tank as being full. They have no control over it. So while it's there, we use it if it's available, but we can't depend on it.
Okay. Are there any other comments? Go ahead.
I'd move second reading.
Oh, sorry, we haven't. All those in favor of first reading? Motion carried.
Sorry, I thought we voted on that.
And then move second reading?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Shannon. Comments? All those in favor? Motion carried. And third reading. Thank you, Director Shannon. And do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Bodnar. Okay, all those in favor? Okay, motion carried. Okay, so that is the end of item 8. We go into item 9, but I would like to call a 10-minute just bio break for everyone. We have, I think, 6 more pages to go in the agenda, so we'll come back at 3:26, and yeah, just have a quick break. Thank you. So John, for the drag race, is it $30 per car to participate, or is it $30 to sponsor a car, or is it kind of both?
No, it's not. All it is a cruise, and it's starting off at the athletic hall and then going out to the Beaver Creek Hall, I believe. But it's $30 per car to participate in the cruise.
Okay.
So I'm not exactly sure what the event totally is, but I think there's a show and shine at the end of the thing, or some games or some other thing. But yeah, just yeah,
okay,
a get together for the car nuts, and a good way to raise some funds.
Yeah, my dad's got an elk, so he might want to do it. See if his wife is up to it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
My understanding, John's, was that the $30 was I mean, to participate in that $30 is essentially going straight to the charities. But I did notice online that there's some racers in the racing community that can't make it, but they're just making the donations to the event regardless. And they've started like I don't know what you call it, when somebody donates something and they encourage everybody else to match it, that kind of thing. So it looks like it's generating some positive growth online and attention. So that's good.
Well, the emergency ward funding is still a long ways from where they need to be. That's for sure.
Yeah. The kind of Facebook birthday kind of model of fundraising, where you pick I didn't do that this year. I didn't even think of that. But you pick a fundraising society or charity. You can advertise online and people can donate. It's something similar to that, I'd assume.
Cool.
Alrighty. Well, that's 3:26. Give it a couple minutes for everyone to get back or turn on their video. I think that's technically enough for us to get going. Okay, so let's open up and welcome everyone back. We're looking at item 9.1, which is the electoral area directors. First item is the Bamfield Housing Needs Report. And I think that's, oh, there's Amy. I think that's you and others.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen here. Everyone can see that and hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you and see it. Under the view option, you might be able to do full screen in some way.
I only kept it as a little bit smaller just in case people have the video on the side, but
oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think it'll work okay.
Okay.
So I'm definitely excited to be here today to share with you the first of 10 housing needs reports, and this one's for Bamfield. And so of course there's a lot of agenda items left to go through, so I'm going to make this presentation shorter, and then we can do longer presentations in the future for community members as requested, etc. And so just a little recap on housing needs reports. Local governments are legislatively required to complete them by April 2022 and then update them every 5 years after. And really the purpose of them are to help better understand current and future housing needs, identify gaps in the housing supply, and they can be a critical first step, of course, in developing future housing strategy or action plan. And of course, essentially, they could be used to begin to meet the housing goals, develop policies, as well as actions. And so goals of the housing needs reports are threefold. First, to clarify the problem. Second, to identify focus areas. And then the third is to really inform regional action. So before I get into the overview of the Bamfield Housing Needs Report, I just wanted to quickly touch on or recap on what's going on with the entire overall ACRD Housing Needs Report project. And so the ACRD is managing grant funding from UBCM to complete a total of 10 housing needs reports. And so there will be a separate report completed for each of the 6 ACRD electoral areas. as well as reports for the 4 Treaty First Nations, and then an overall sort of summary ACRD report highlighting them all and sort of tying them back together. And so a quick update on what's going on with all of the separate reports. Community engagement is complete and housing needs reports are being drafted for the 4 Alberni Valley electoral areas, as well as Uchuklesit. And then about a month ago, I think it was, we got underway with securing a consultant and working on a West Coast housing need and demand study. And so essentially that's a project that's being led by Macola, the consulting company, and that involves Tofino, Ucluelet, Long Beach, Ucluelet, Tokwat, as well as Taloqua First Nation. So it's quite a large project, but it's well underway, and we're excited to start engagement or continue on with engagement. And then last but not least is Huu-ay-aht First Nation. So that housing needs report will start in September. And that was sort of as a request from Huu-ay-aht. They wanted to make sure the Banfield one was done, and then we'll sort of build off of that to develop the Huu-ay-aht First Nations report. And so getting into the Banfield Housing Needs Report. So it was developed between November 2020 and July 2021, and it was completed through the following 5 phases there. And I will touch on a few of these, but really we had an awesome response rate to the online survey. We had some awesome community forums, as well as a great APC meeting. And there was a lot of time spent on data collection and analysis, as well as the drafting of the final report, which is in your agenda package. And so the Banfield Housing Need Report includes the following 7 sections. There are 3 profiles, one is demographic, one economic, and one housing. And then there's a section that touches on the housing need, as well as the impacts of growth. Summarizing community engagement, and then some strategies on how we move forward with this report. I'm just going to go through just a couple slides, just highlight some of the key pieces of data information from the census. So of course, we all know the most recent census is 2016, so we very much look forward to updating these reports as the 2021 census data becomes available. But of course, we have to report on the most recent, which is 2016. So this graph here just shows in blue the Banfield electoral area A, to show that the most recent population we have is about 243. And of course, there's been limited population growth. And my bullet at the bottom is actually supposed to say that ACRD grew 0.3% over that time period. So really there's a bit of fluctuation, but it's held on pretty steady, and there hasn't been a lot of growth in Banfield over the years. In terms of age distribution, so this graph here shows median age. And so you can see the Banfield electoral area is shown in green. And so in 2016, there was actually a lot higher of a median age overall for Banfield. So 58 years compared to 46.6 for the ACRD, and even lower for BC at 42. And you can see there in 2011, the median age was dipped down to 34 years almost. And so that's quite a 20-year difference between 2011 and 2016. So I just wanted to point out, though, with data for areas that have small population size, any little fluctuation is going to lead to, of course, or have larger effects on the data results. So there's still more things to unpack, but it's just very interesting to see, or as we know, that the majority of the population in Banfield is, older. And then through community engagement, a lot of people, as we know, they've lived in Banfield for many years. They don't plan on moving, as well as a lot of people are, purposely moving to Banfield to retire for that, small and remote lifestyle. This next chart here shows the age distribution on the left for Banfield electoral area, as well as the ACRD. And so you can see in the yellow on the left there, 38% of the population for the Banfield electoral area is between 50 and 64 years, and that's in comparison to 24% for the ACRD. And then when you lump in the blue on top, the 25%, I think that's about 63% of the population in Banfield is over 50 years. So really, this is building on the age-friendly work that we did in 2019, 2020, and needing to plan for those people that are aging, that so they can age in place and stay in their current home, or that there's going to be other housing available to support them as they age. And this slide shows households in Bamfield. And so there was 145 households in Bamfield in 2016. 72% were owner. And so the graph shows in the green electoral area A, and it shows the household size. So you can see that the first few bars there show 1 and 2 person households. And so Bamfield has over half of households, so 52% are 1 person households. So that can definitely have, varying impacts on housing, services, that sort of thing. And that's in comparison to the ACRD, where it was sort of, more somewhat evenly distributed. And of course, there's lots of 1 and 2 person households without families. So that came up a lot in the engagement, that not a lot of families overall are living in Bamfield currently. This next slide shows median household income. As you can see in the green, there was quite a difference between 2006 and 2016 for the Bamfield electoral area. And I do need to note that for whatever reason, there was not data available for 2011 for median household income for Bamfield. And so comparing those green bars, it shows that there was quite a decrease overall in this income with over $16,000, or a decrease of 26% between these census years. And so really that has quite an impact on overall quality of life, securing and maintaining housing, and all of that. And so again, a reminder that household size numbers, the representative data was smaller. There could have been less people in the workforce at that time. So there are lots of factors that come into play, but this is the best data that we have to work with. So next is dwellings. And so the majority of dwellings in Bamfield, 66%, of course, are single detached houses. And then the next largest is 21%, which are movable dwellings. And then the size of the houses in terms of number of bedrooms, over half are 2 bedrooms, followed by 21% 1 bedroom. So that aligns well with what we just saw there. And I chose to highlight this slide because, as you can see in the green for the Bamfield electoral area, there's definitely more of an even mix of the construction period of when dwellings were built. And that's in comparison to the ACRD in blue. So what that sort of means is, unlike the ACRD and say the city of Port Alberni that overall have more older housing stock, there's a lot more even a mix. So it might actually indicate that there could be less pressure to repair and replace aging dwellings and whatnot. And then you could see that the highest construction period was between 1991 and 2000, with 28% of the dwellings constructed. So it'll be interesting to see as this information is updated with 2021 census, of course. A couple of key highlights from the online survey. So again, as I alluded to earlier, we had a pretty great response rate with almost half, so 46% of the population. Almost 70% were owners, 64% lived in a single detached house, obviously. Bedrooms aligned with what we talked about earlier, majority two bedroom. And 78% of people said they prefer to live in a single detached house. And so that is definitely the preference. And then this one's neat to hear that over half plan to live in Bamfield in their current housing for more than 10 years. So again, as they age, we need to really consider how we plan for that population. And then this number I'd expect to be a little bit higher, but 16% indicated they're living in Bamfield to support commercial operation or business. Getting there, 2 more slides left. Okay, so key data findings. There's a lot of data findings, but these are just a few key ones I wanted to pull out. So projected population by the year 2026 indicates that that'll grow from 243 to approximately 267, as well as households will grow from the 145 to 164. So it's important to know that this number is based on the data we have available, right? BC Stats population projections, the 0.3% annual growth rate for the ACRD. So of course that those numbers could change as development picks up, that sort of thing. So lots of different factors that could change those numbers. And then again, just highlighting this, the older population of 50 to 84 years, which is 63%. And of course that number is expected to increase. And so really when we crunched the numbers, we came up with 16 new dwellings will need to be built by 2026 to accommodate this projected population. And that is, of course, assuming the average household size stays at 1.6%. If more families move to Banfield, then that household size will increase, and then it will possibly decrease the number of new dwellings needed. So not huge surprises here, but definitely interesting to see this data. Just quickly, the last 2 slides here highlighting some key housing issues and challenges. And most of this information comes out of all of the wonderful feedback we got through the community engagement. So really a lot of discussion around the impact of vacation and commercial rentals, of course, and then seasonal dwellers that sometimes are leaving their houses empty, but yet those houses are not made available as part of the rental market. So some concerns around that, as well as we just talked about, there's data that shows the small household size in Banfield, but yet there was a lot of indication through the engagement that many families actually do want to move to Banfield. There's just some barriers, like they literally cannot find a place to live, that sort of thing. And then of course, some that are fortunate enough to find housing, then they're sort of sometimes asked to leave in the peak months. So then they are displaced and have to find alternative arrangements. So that's definitely a concern. The Marine Sciences Center talked about the difficulty with attracting staff, of course, with this low vacancy, and especially staff with families that want to come live in the area. And then, of course, there's a lot of discussion around the impacts on this unique Banfield community feel and what's going to happen as development increases and improvements to the road, etc. So lots of discussion around that. And last slide here, I'll just close with 5 strategies that the project team came up with for strategies to address these housing gaps. And so, of course, there's lots more details in the report here, but just to summarize these quickly, it's really focusing on the community partnerships and working on, continued collaboration and communicating with, all community partners, the Hawaiian First Nation, the Marine Sciences Center, the Banfield Community Affairs Society, and that sort of, all of the different community groups. And then, of course, working on, developing different policies and recommendation or regulation, and that could be part of the upcoming OCP update, as well as the current zoning bylaw review. And then really focusing on regional housing needs and the shared service delivery. We'll get into it more when we work on the Hawaii's specific report, but definitely they talked about how they're currently developing housing in Anakla, and they're going to be developing even more over the next few years. And so how does that impact the community of Banfield? And so again, we'll explore that more in the next housing needs report. And then really this ongoing monitoring. So we do need to update these reports for every 5 years, especially a new census comes available. But this might increase in priority as development and/or the market trends continue to change. So we'll kind of see what happens with that. So I feel like that was a very quick overview of a very detailed report. But yes, so I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any comments or questions? Bob, did you want to say anything? Sorry, Director Beckett.
Thank you. I'd like to move the motion and then comment if I could, sir. That the Board of Directors receive the Banfield Housing Needs Report as presented.
Okay, seconded by Director Shannon. Okay, and comment?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd like to thank Amy. I know how hard she worked to move this forward. And of course, I'd like to thank Vancouver Island University for their work as well. It is absolutely critical for us as a community to move forward and access other grants and opportunities. And we can't do that without having the housing needs report. So this was critical because we are absolutely struggling with the lack of appropriate housing to meet the various needs here. And this is the other thing that's really come out of this is the chicken and the egg. We have kindergarten through grade 9, K through 9. We cannot attract the professional folks, the families. If we don't have K to 12 education here, and again, this report identifies that it's not just one aspect that creates challenges for the health of a community, but certainly housing and education are high on our priorities. They're top for my priority as the representative moving forward. So again, thank you to Amy and VIU. The second motion I'd like to bring to the table is that the board of directors direct staff to publish the Banfield housing. Oh, sorry, we have to vote on that.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any other comments on the first motion? Director Bodnar, please go ahead.
Thank you. That was an interesting report, and it was nice that it was quite very clear and understandable. It's just a comment that I'd like to make is, Banfield Road has always had such a negative reputation, and now that it's going to be fixed and become a lot more convenient for people to use and safer, would you anticipate a big boom in Banfield?
Is that directed to staff? Yes?
I think so.
I don't know if Mike wants to speak to that.
Sure. I certainly could speak to that a little bit. Certainly early indications as we've seen more interest in properties in Banfield. And certainly we will expect, just with the ease of people getting there, we'll expect there'll be new development pressures in Banfield.
Yeah. Any other comments? I think on this one specifically, I'm interested in seeing what the Hawaiian kind of other side of the coin will look at here, especially given the work that is being done on the road. I'm thinking that will likely exacerbate some of the issues that are already outlined in the report, especially when it comes to a demand for housing just generally, but also the effect of things like investment properties and short-term vacation rentals. Those kind of things are on Hawaii's radar, but not to the same degree that they are here. And I think there's going to be this kind of push-pull gravity-based relationship between our two communities. And I think I need to talk to Bob more about what this will look like in the future, just to make sure that we're organizing things in a good way. With that in mind,
if I could, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
With respect to Hawaiian, I have to tell you that the Hawaiian, the community of Banfield, and the Marine Sciences Center have been working so closely. It is almost a model for the level of cooperation. Banfield Marine Sciences Center has offered potentially a piece of their property for a joint venture, including Hawaiian, to build a multifamily dwelling facility on that. And again, I too look forward to the report coming from Hawaiian through ACRD. But the level of cooperation is second to none with your nation, sir.
That's great to hear. We have great staff who are more than willing to really work with ACRD and learn from one another. So we do have a motion in front of us. So those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. So that's the first motion.
Second motion, Mr. Chair, is that the Board of Directors direct staff to publish the Banfield Housing Needs Report on the ACRD website for public access.
Sorry, and seconded by Director Roberts. Any further comments? It's seeing none. All those in favor? Okay, motion carried. Okay, thank you, Amy. All right, that brings us to item B, which is the 460 Bachina Road. So, Mike, is that you? Do you want to?
Yeah, it would be me. So, if you would like, Mr. Chair, items B through I in the planning section, I would say, are fairly straightforward. So rather than present on each of those, I could certainly leave it to the area directors. to make the motions, and then if there's any questions, I will answer them. I would like to speak to Jay and the following items.
Okay, I think that's very much appreciated. Thank you, Mike. Okay, so on item B, we do have a set of 3 motions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would make the motion that bylaw P1435, Regional District of Alberni-Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be read a first time.
Thank you. And seconded by Director Roberts. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried.
That the public hearing for bylaw P1435 be delegated to the Director for Electoral Area A or the Chairperson of the Regional District.
Thank you. I do have a seconder. Thank you, Dr. Shannon. All those in favor? Motion carried.
That the Board of Directors confirm that adoption of bylaw 1P435 is subject to confirmation from a registered on-site wastewater practitioner that the property is capable of accommodating on-site sewer disposal to a minimum 0.6 acre density, meeting technical referral agency requirements.
Thank you, Director Cote. All those in favor? All opposed? And motion carried. Okay, that brings us to item C, which is a Sprout Lake item.
Director Jack, I am this conflict of interest in this one.
Thank you for reminding me. I think you just got kicked out. Can we confirm that that happened? That was very fast.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
Kicked out.
Director Cote, would you like to speak to this?
Okay, thank you. I would make a recommendation that the Board of Directors issue development variance DVD 20011.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. McNabb. Any comments? See none. All those in favor? And motion carried. Alrighty. Just wait for Director Bodner to be added again. Oh, I should open that up. There we go. Welcome back, Dr. Bodner.
Thank you.
All right, and now we're on item D, another Spout Lake item. So, Dr. Cote, would you like to just keep it rolling?
Okay, thank you. To begin with, I'd like to refer to page 275 that the Toth report references an old bylaw, which is not in effect. Page 275, let's go there. Number 14, it says medical marijuana facilities, is not to be included because that's from an old bylaw. So at this time, though, I would like to make the recommendation that the Board of Directors consider issuing development variance permit DVD 20012, subject to neighboring properties being notified as per Local Government Act S499.
And do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Bodner. Okay, any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. All right, another Sprout Lake one, if you want to keep going, Dr. Cote.
Thanks, I'm just trying to find it.
Oh, no worries. I'm
Going through, okay, here we go. Okay, I would make the recommendation that the Board of Directors waive the 10% road frontage requirements for the proposed lots 7, 8, 9, 12, 13, 21, 35, and 36 as per subdivision plan of parcel A of lot 197 Catherine Drive.
seconded by Director Roberts. Thank you. Are there...
Dr. Roberts has a question.
Oh, you have a comment. Sorry, Dr. Roberts, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, are these half-acre lot sizes?
If I may, Mr. Chair, these are 2 hectare or 5 acre lot sizes. So they're larger parcels.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. Are you comfortable with seconding, Director Roberts? Yeah, okay. All those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. All right, that brings us to item F, a Beaver Creek item. So if you have any comments or questions or motions, Director McNabb?
I'd like to move that the Board of Directors receive the public hearing report.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Shannon. All those in favor? Motion carried.
And I would like to move that the Board of Directors receive the public hearing minutes.
Thank you, Director Shannon. Comments? Okay, all those in favor? Motion carried.
And that the bylaw P1425 Regional District of Alberni Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be read for a second time.
Thank you for that. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Bodner. All those in favor? Motion carried.
And that bylaw P1435 Regional District of Alberni Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be read for a third time.
Okay. Did you say 3-5 or 2-5?
1425.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Roberts. Okay. All those in favor? Motion carried. All right. Yeah, if you want to keep rolling.
Okay. I would move that the Board of Directors receive the public hearing report.
Thank you. Seconder. Thank you, Director Bodner. All those in favor? Motion carried.
And I would move that the Board of Directors receive the public hearing minutes.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder, please? Thank you, Dr. Bodner. Okay, all those in... Oh, do you have a comment, Dr. Beckett? No? Oh, you're seconding? Okay. All those in favor? Okay, motion carried.
And I'd move that bylaw P1426 Beaver Creek Official Community Plan Amendment bylaw be read for a second time.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Cote. All those in favor? Motion carried.
Move that bylaw P1426 Beaver Creek Official Community Plan Amendment bylaw be read for a third time.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Cote. All those in favor? Okay, motion carried.
And that bylaw P1427 Regional District of Alberni Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be read for a second time.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bodner. Okay. All those in favor? Motion carried.
And that bylaw P1427 Regional District of Alberni Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be read for a third time. I'm done.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Bodner. Okay, all those in favor? Yeah, motion carried. Okay, that brings us to item H, McIntyre, Cherry Creek. It looks like it's just the one motion at the top of page 9 of the agenda. Director Bodner, would you like to speak to us? Oh, you're muted though, sorry.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
I move that the bylaw P1424 Regional District of Alberni Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be adopted.
Thank you for that. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. Cote. All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to item I. That is, Cherry Creek again.
I believe, did Mike want to speak to that first?
I think it was item J.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Item J,
Okay.
I'd like to speak to you, please.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's
Okay, I would move that bylaw P1433 Regional District of Alberni Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be read for first time.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Cote. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried.
And move that the public hearing for bylaw 1P1433 be delegated to the director for electoral area F, the alternate director, or the chairperson of the regional district.
Thank you, Director Cote. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Okay, motion carried.
And then move that the Board of Directors confirm that adoption of bylaw P1433 is subject to confirmation from a registered on-site wastewater practitioner that the property is capable of accommodating on-site sewage disposal to a 1 acre minimum lot size.
Oh, and you add the other two as well.
Approval of the zoning amendment by the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure in accordance with Section 5(2) of the Transportation Act for development adjacent to the controlled access highway, meeting technical referral agency requirements.
All right, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Cote. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, so that brings us to item J. Yeah, Timberlane Road. Please go ahead, Mike.
Sure. Just really briefly, I wanted to introduce this one. It is an application to expand the commercial campground that is located behind the Timber Lodge. This is one that was the expansion has already happened, and so when the owners expanded, they didn't realize that there's two commercial zonings up there, and where the campground went wasn't already zoned for campground, so they have expanded. They've applied to rectify that. This was reviewed by the Advisory Planning Commission on July 5th, and the members in attendance did support the staff recommendations, which are to move forward and get to a public hearing on this application, and just the observations from staff as they look at it. It is well laid out and a well-managed property and commercial campsite. So I'm happy to answer any questions if any directors have any questions.
Are there any initial comments or questions? If not, if you're willing, Diane, we can go through the motions.
I move that bylaw P1434 Regional District of Alberni Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be read for first time.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Roberts. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried.
I move that the public hearing for bylaw P1434 be delegated to the director for electoral area F, the alternate director, or the chairperson of the regional district.
Thank you. And seconded by, thank you, Dr. McNabb. Okay, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried.
I move that the Board of Directors confirm that adoption of bylaw P1434 is subject to issuance of a development permit to satisfy the requirements of DPA
3, I think.
3, objectives for form and character. Confirmation from a registered on-site wastewater practitioner that the sewage disposal system on-site are capable of servicing the expanded campground, hotel, and restaurant uses. Registration of an easement over a portion of the neighborhood lot 1, Plan VIP 35581, property to the west, securing access to existing on-site sewage disposal infrastructure and road access into the west side of the campground. Approval of the zoning amendment by the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure in accordance with Section 52 of the Transportation Act for development adjacent to the controlled access highway, meeting technical referral agency requirements.
Okay. Seconded by? Thank you, Director Roberts. All those in favor? Did you have a comment? Sorry, Dr. Roberts.
So through the chair to Mr. Erg, While this proposal for the campground has not been applied for, I'm just looking at a comparison between the Hollies and this property. Is there any significant challenges there?
Certainly in their initial review, staff didn't see any significant challenges. As part of the rezoning process, this will be referred to a number of agencies, which will include Cherry Creek Fire Department and Island Health, as well as Ministry of Transportation. And as mentioned in the staff report, because it's next to Highway 4, the ministry actually must approve the bylaw. They actually have to stamp and sign it under Section 52 of the Transportation Act. So, so those things will be covered off, and we'll do a full referral out to agencies.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mike. Any further comments? Okay. All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to item K, which is a temporary use permit for Cherry Creek. Mike, did you want to introduce it?
Yeah, certainly. I'll introduce it. So the board at the last board meeting heard from the owner of this property and directed staff to prepare some the renewal and conditions for renewing this temporary use permit. So just as a bit of a refresher, this temporary use permit was issued in 2017 for 22 RV sites. The permit expired and there was some additional campsites added to the property, and the owner has subsequently applied to renew their temporary use permit. So staff have prepared some conditions, and I also in the staff report I highlighted 17 conditions that our staff will recommend goes into the development permit if we proceed to that stage. So again, this is a two-step renewal process. The first one would be to pass the recommendations that are presented here, and then that would come back to a subsequent meeting to actually issue the temporary use permit. As part of this, in the recommendations, staff have recommended that the campsites be limited to 22. There are more than 22 campsites on this property currently. I did speak to the property owner, and they asked that 22 be increased to 28 by 6, which is what they have on site, to allow that number and the people that are there to continue occupying it. I have also had some initial conversations or referrals to Cherry Creek Fire Department and Island Health, and they've had some initial comments back. Cherry Creek Fire Department had some concerns about the proximity of the RVs to each other, as well as some of the sites being occupied on a more permanent basis, which then can lead to more structures on site. So some of those things have been addressed in the conditions of the temporary use permit, as far as maintaining a minimum of 120 square meters, which is a significant size and exceeds some campground sizes, as well as maintaining minimum distances between individual RVs or recreational vehicles. If the board furthers this application, we will do an official referral to Island Health, Cherry Creek Fire, as well as the Ministry of Transportation. The other thing that we've recommended is, while a public hearing is not a requirement of this of a temporary use permit, there is nothing that prevents the board from seeking additional public input. So it is certainly within the board's right to ask and hold a public. It wouldn't be a public hearing in the same sense that we do with rezonings, but to hold a public meeting, basically following the same criteria. We would notify neighbors and put an ad in the paper and set a time. So that is certainly something we can do, and I have included that in my recommendations as well. I think at that stage, that's everything I wanted to go over, and I'm happy to answer any questions people have. I think there was one more thing I wanted to mention, because we had discussion, or the board had discussions about rezoning, which is a very permanent change in the land use, versus a temporary use permit, which is, by nature up to a maximum of, for this case, it would be for another 3 years. But the temporary use permit process does give the board additional tools or regulatory authority that that a rezoning wouldn't have. So, and one of those being that the temporary use permit can be revoked if the conditions aren't met. And the other thing is if the ownership changed, the permit could also be revoked, and that could be done by the board. So I know that it's the applicant's intention to move towards rezoning. I would recommend that if we're going to proceed with the temporary use permit, that we do it for the longest period possible, which is 3 years. And then, if there is a rezoning within that time, the permit could be revoked early. But it also provides an opportunity to monitor the how this property is managed and how the campsite runs. So again, I will stop there and answer any questions.
Okay, so I have Director McNabb and then Director Bodner. Did I miss anyone? No, please go ahead.
So the existing temporary, well, the non-existing temporary use permit expired in May of 2020. I mean, I hate to reward somebody that basically circumvented the rules and carried on doing things that they ought not to do under the permit, and then have the permit extended for another year on top of the 3 years. So they're really looking at 4 years with a temporary use permit when they only would have got 3 years from May of 2017. So I don't like the idea of starting to whenever we ink this thing, starting from there with another 3 years. I think it just rewards bad behavior.
Thank you for that. Director Bodner.
Thank you. I did drive through there this morning because I really wanted to be up to date with what's happening there. And I counted as they still have 32 trailers there. And if we do give them a temporary permit, so how are we going to keep it? I feel that this is a situation that we really have to stay on top of. The areas that are supposed to be marked clearly about the camps, that still isn't done as well. There's places there that have gardens. Some of those places have been there for a long time. And I think that we have to make them, if they get another temporary permit, we have to really be on top of that to make them accountable for what they of those 17 things that the staff has put out for it. Also, if it's going to be 22 units that are in there, how much time are we going to give them to get to make their numbers 22 instead of 32? And so I have some really mixed feelings about that, and I just wanted to pass that on.
Mr. Chair.
Please go ahead.
I think if I can just provide some feedback on those comments. So if the board proceeds with issuing this temporary use permit, certainly we have strengthened the language and the conditions in the temporary use permit. There is also a provision under the legislation that allows us to issue temporary use permits to require a security. So that security can be in the form of a bond or cash. So we can set that condition. And then if they do not do the things they're supposed to, they can the board can revoke the permit. That would also be a clause within the permit. And then the idea of the security is to guarantee the performance and the conditions of the temporary use permit. Sorry, I did forget to mention that in my presentation on this. So and we don't have to decide on the amount of a security. But at this board meeting, that could come at a subsequent one. But I certainly, we could get an indication if that is something that the board would like to include in the temporary use permit if it's renewed. And then with respect to Director McNabb's comment about rewarding the bad behavior or their non-compliance, I agree with that. But at the last board meeting, there was also discussion about rezoning this property. And And I would recommend that the board not consider rezoning this property until we've seen it operated for a period of time in a manner that the community and the board is comfortable with. And so that's my rationale for recommending that we go, with the maximum amount permitted in this case, with the additional caveats that there can be a security, as well as if they do not comply with the terms of the permit, the permit can be rescinded. We don't have that option under zoning. We don't have. We can change the zoning down to something, but then it maintains a grandfather. The current status is grandfathered as long as they were to continue a campsite. So a temporary use permit in this situation would give the board more control and ensure compliance with what the board's wanting to do.
Okay. Director Roberts, you had a comment?
Yeah, thank you through the chair to Mr. Hurd. Just a clarification on the number of sites that are there. There were originally allowed 22 and they've gone up to 28. And I heard Director Bodner say there was 32 there.
Yes, and there was 30 plus when I looked was on site. And I didn't go count. Recently, I've observed more than 22. I no doubt. The 28 number comes from what Heather Powell, the owner, asked me to bring up. This she talked to me this morning about this and said their wish would be to operate a 28 site campsite. I absolutely. There's 32 there right now. I'm not saying there's not. And that is something that we raised at the last board meeting as a concern, is that this the minute the temporary use permit expanded or expired, the number of campsites increased. So it's and this campsite provides a service, and the people there are there for a reason, and it's a mix of people holidaying and living there for work, and that was part of the discussion and presentation from the owner last month. And I guess at this stage, it's looking to the board as far as what's the best way to move forward and allow something there. If the board goes with 22, which is what the staff recommendation is, we would need to give the owner a period of time, for example 90 days, to remove those, and we could actually build that into the temporary use permit, that 20, it must be 22 units by a specific date. Like that is certainly something we can do as well, so that it's legalized and meets the objectives of the board. The other thing would be to I recommend in this case that we hold a public meeting and notify the neighbors in the same way that we notify for a public hearing, which and then allow that feedback rather than just notifications and receiving letters, which is the normal process on a temporary use permit. So, and that's built into the recommendations. So, and going through this recommendation does not mean that the board's made a final decision on this development permit. It's just the first step in renewing it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. My concern clearly as a former firefighter and fire chief is that and I know you've dealt with Cherry Creek Fire Department. I've talked to them about this, and their concerns are the same as mine. I also agree with the fact that they should be posting a security bond or performance bond to guarantee that that they follow the rules as have been laid out. And I think that the regional district has been more than fair with them, but I really would like to see this enforced to the maximum. So thank you for that.
And the security bond is item F under the recommendations.
Okay, so I have Dr. Bodner, Cote, and McNabb. Did I miss anyone? No? Okay. Dr. Bodner?
Mike, you did answer my question about putting a time limit on it, and I appreciate that. I think that's really important in this case. And the other thing is putting it up to 28 when there's already a concern about 22, I think is really pushing it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I have Directors Cote and then McNabb.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mr. Erg. The way that I'm sort of processing this application is as a renewal. So a renewal would be from the last date of when the first application was terminated or expired. So I don't see this as a new application or as a renewal if it's not continuing from the last, the first application. The application was for 22 units. I think that's what the application is. If you start changing things, it's a new application. So then my next question would be, can one property do a new application for a different scenario where they want more units at this place? So I see that the application is changed, in my opinion, is changed, and to renew it, you have to renew from the date that it was expired. So some clarification, please.
Certainly. So there is, you know, if a temporary use permit is, the use is significantly different than the original one in 2017, it could be considered a new application. And you know, we're treating this as a renewal. We certainly can get clarification as far as, you know, legal clarification about how we could do that. My recommendations in preparing this report were that we've seen where the uses have gone outside of and gone beyond the scope of the original temporary use permit, and providing the board with the best options to maintain control, both through the ability to revoke this permit and hold the security. So that was my rationale for advising that we go with the maximum 3 years permitted. There has been a gap in there. They haven't been compliant with the bylaw for the last year. That's where it's at with that one. And really that recommendations coming from the discussion that the board was wanting to consider a rezoning application. Now, you know, to do a rezoning application, the board has to go through, you know, all of the readings and the process set out in the Local Government Act. But there was certainly discussion that the board at the last meeting that the board would entertain a rezoning application. You know, so that's always the case, but we cannot hold a bond for a rezoning application, and we cannot revoke a rezoning in the same way that there's a temporary use permit. So this is, you know, up to this, the board makes the decision. This is some staff recommendations, and I'm just explaining my rationale. If the board were to choose to go with a 2 or 1 or you know, anything up to 3 years, that, you know, that is completely at the board's discretion. I just wanted to lay out the options and my rationale for providing those recommendations. That's all.
Okay, so not to be too remedial, and before we get to Director McNabb, just to clarify then, it sounds like the temporary use permit approach maximizes control until we know. And once you actually rezone, you're kind of according, for lack of a better term, like a bunch of rights to the person, as long as they act within the zoning, that we don't really have that level of control. And that's why. Is that the idea? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you for that. Dr. McNabb, please go ahead.
So I somehow missed the timing of when they would have to bring this into conformity.
So in discussions with the owner today, she told me if the board went with 22 sites that they as part of the renewal, that she would ask that they be given 90 days to bring that into compliance. And so, you know, that was her request, and then what I was mentioning is that if the board does proceed with issuing this temporary use permit or this renewal, we could build that right into the temporary use permit as one of the conditions that, we could basically just add a line that recognizing that there's currently, 32 RVs on site. This needs to be brought by a certain date. There can only be 22 RVs, and again, that's, if that doesn't happen, the permit could be revoked. That is the way to do it. But that again is at the discretion of the board. So, but I mean, I think what the owner said is 90 days, and that could be a reasonable approach.
Okay, so Director Bodner, please go ahead.
Sorry for belaboring this, but I really want to make sure I understand this. So we can give them the temporary permit, but can we make it for 2 years? Can you clarify that so that we would consider the lapse of 1 year as counting that as a year they've already spent?
Yes, the board. Yes, you can. As a board, you can set it for less than 3 years. So it could be for 2 years. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are there any other comments? Okay, seeing none, there is one motion with looks like 6 clauses to it. Dan, are you comfortable with moving this as it is? Yeah. Oh, Diane, you're muted. Yeah.
Darn, I keep forgetting. Thank you. I move that the Board of Directors consider issuing temporary use permit TUP 20005, subject to neighboring properties being notified as per Local Government Act S494. The applicant agreeing to proposed conditions of TUP 20005, numbered 1 through 7. Positive referral responses from Island Health, Cherry Creek Fire Department, and MOTI, limiting the number of campsites to 22 prior to the TUP being issued. Holding public meeting to allow for public input. Require that the owner provide a security to guarantee the performance of the terms of the permit as per section 496 of the Local Government Act.
Okay.
And I just wanted to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I had noticed, I think there's a bit of a typo. It's 1 through 17, not 1 through 7. Dan, I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. And I think the others, that's okay. Do we have a seconder though? Yeah, okay, thank you, Director Roberts. Did anyone have any comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Did you get a new headset, Director Bodner? Because you're coming through like super clear for me now.
Oh, I did some changes around on the computer, so
yeah,
I'm a different setup now.
Okay, that's what it is. Okay. So before we get to item L, I got a message from Heather. I just wanted to reiterate that the vaccine truck is in the Canadian Tire parking lot in Port Alberni today, and that it's there until 7 p.m. and it's giving first dose vaccines with no appointments necessary. So for the 5 viewers that we have on YouTube, hopefully you can spread the word that way too. But that's actually the most viewers we've had ever. So there you go. Okay, so with that in mind, that brings us to item L, which is the Rural Planning and Building Inspection Update. So it's the memo. I don't think anybody has to really go through it. There's only a couple of pages. Could we just get a motion to receive it? Thank you, Dr. McNabb. Do you have a comment? No? Okay, do we have a second?
Oh, I would just ask, part of it is that we refer to the next electoral area directors committee for discussion as well.
That was in there though. Yeah. Okay, all those in favor? Okay, motion carried. Okay, that brings us to staff reports. Okay, before we get to Heather, just please peruse through what you see as the meeting schedule and whatnot. Do we have an update in regards to COVID? Or is this just all just receive the reports? I can't remember. I think it's just receive the reports. Dr. Shannon, you move? Okay, do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. Bodner. All those in favor?
Mr. Chair?
Oh, please go ahead, Mike.
Just one item that I had in the staff reports was just regarding nuisance and odors from farm uses and the process for the public complaints. I just wanted to highlight that and just you know, if directors are getting feedback, any directors are getting feedback from residents, that we have reached out to the Ministry of Agriculture, and just the process is highlighted in there for filing a complaint with the Farm Industry Review Board. And I just wanted to note that staff actually asked about the regional district filing a complaint, and we're not allowed to do that. So it has to come from individuals, and there is a $100 fee. So I just wanted to highlight that for all the directors. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for that highlight, because that does kind of change things a bit, doesn't it? Okay. Okay, with that in mind, all those in favor? All opposed? And motion carried. $100. Really? Okay. There are no committee reports. That brings us into member reports. Okay, first item is item A, 911. Dr. McNabb.
No report.
Okay. Regional Library, Dr. Cote.
Thank you. So Vera has hired a new executive director. His name is Ben Hyman, and he's started. So it's going to be interesting. Viral is going through the process of reviewing our strategic plan, and new start. It's a new page for Viral. So looking forward to that. Thanks.
Okay, Chamber of Commerce, Dr. Minions. Report. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Next item is Air Quality Council, Port Alberni, Dr. Bodner. You are muted, though. You are muted. Yeah.
There has been no meeting last month.
Okay, Dr. Steer, West Coast Aquatic.
Yeah, I thought I'd preempt that one by inviting Tawny to our meeting, so no report.
Okay, good to hear. AVICC, Dr. Cote.
No report at this time. Thanks.
Okay. Beaver Creek Water Advisory Committee.
Very conservative right at the moment. No meeting.
West Island Woodlands Advisory Group, that's myself. No meeting yet. We had one a couple months ago, but I think I've already reported on that. And the next one is Agricultural Development Committee. Dr. Shannon.
Thank you. We haven't had a meeting this month. Our next one is for August 17th, but I do just want to mention that this past month, the Ministry of Agriculture released their new rules in regards to residential housing and flexibility in the ALR. Thank you.
And finally, other reports. I'd asked if Director Beckett wanted to give a rundown of the ministerial visit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll attempt to be brief. MLA Osborne reached out to me weeks ago, identifying that she was going to be in town to meet with the Hoyat Nation and offered an opportunity to meet with myself representing the community, the ACRD. I embraced that opportunity, working with the president of the Banfield Community Affairs Society. We agreed to have a rather small, intimate audience, to have not a meeting, but a conversation with Josie. This was a 10,000-foot level approach, and it also included an invitation to Chief Robert Dennis Sr. to join us. He unfortunately could not make it. Our focus was on anticipated growth and impact on our community. infrastructure costs, current and future. This is somewhat driven by the good asset management work that our staff are doing, although it identifies some real concerns for us. As I already alluded to, the K-12 expansion of our school in cooperation with SD70 is absolutely critical. The housing needs, identifying concerns we have for accommodating our folks, revenue sources, where are we going to get the money to pay for the infrastructures, a focus on creating a positive working relationship with MLA Osborne and staff. We recognize the connection there is absolutely critical. And we finished off by having a tour of the harbor, ice cream cone on the west side boardwalk, and then took Josie, her executive assistant and manager from Ministry of Transportation, salmon fishing. And unlike you, Hewlett and Tofino, we did extremely well out there, I must say. And that was the report. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your report. Yeah, I was on vacation, so I wasn't able to be there for the Hewlett portion of it, but we're getting a report to rest of council tomorrow, so I can probably get some of that and forward it if it's anything relevant to the region. Yeah, that's it for member reports. Could we have a motion to receive? Director McNabb, go ahead.
Motion to receive the reports.
Thank you, Director McNabb. Seconded by, thank you, Director Shannon. Any further comments or questions? See none. All those in favor? Okay, motion carried. All right, we have no unfinished business, no late business. I'm wondering if we have any responses at the responses email address.
No, Mr. Chair, there's been no responses. There were a couple of participants. They're no longer on the meeting, so no questions.
Okay, so I think now it just comes down to having a motion to recess the meeting to conduct, I believe, hospital district is next. Is that correct? Yes, it is. Okay, could we have a motion, please? All right, everyone, all those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, gotta load that up now.
Alrighty then, I'd like to call the meeting of the Alberta Claycott Regional Hospital District to order and recognize that we are meeting primarily on the territories of the Ipachizit and Tishatz First Nations, and that we honor and respect that, and ask for notice to the attendees and delegates that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube on the regional district's website. And I'd ask for approval of agenda. Director Roberts, Director Shannon, any additions to the agenda? All in favor? Anybody opposed? Looking good. Adoption of the minutes of June 9th, 2021. Move adoption. Director Cote and Director Beckett. Anything amiss on those? Everybody likes them? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have no correspondence for information or actions. We have no request for bylaws, so we have reports. Director Beckett.
No report, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Alberta Claycott Continuing Care Society, no report. West Coast Native Health Care Society, Director Cote.
Thank you. We had groundbreaking for the 40 units of low-cost housing.
Awesome.
So that was last month, and meeting coming up.
Great. Tofino General Hospital, West Coast Directors.
Yes, just a quick one. It's the same old news, but reflected. The one big new piece of news is that we have a new site manager replacing Michelle Hanna. Chris Siberis has taken over that position. It's been there about 6 weeks now, and so that's our new staffing addition there. Just the same issues that we've discussed many times here around the housing is one of the major critical issues for us once again. we are in the process of trying to hire staff, but we cannot because we have no place to put them. Second to that is also, once again, the hospital facilities. Some of those positions that we have hired for, we don't actually have physical space within the hospital. So they're struggling once again to be able to deliver that service in an appropriate space. The other good piece of news is that we do have a physicians group that are in the process of recruiting to expand our primary care service with those constraints that I've already mentioned. But there's interest again, and in the past we had recruited a doctor, but they had to decline that because of not being able to find appropriate, if you can believe it, they couldn't find an affordable place to purchase, and there was absolutely no rentals available for them as well. So that's in our discussions with Island Health. We continue to bring up those issues around being able to house our employees. So that is, in a nutshell, what is happening, other than, as you might imagine, it is exceptionally busy at the hospital here, just with our seasonal influx of visitors and staff that support that industry. It is the word that was used is overwhelming at times at the hospital here. So that's it for Tofino General Hospital.
Do you have something, Director Cole, or?
Yeah, not about Tofino General Hospital. I don't know if somebody has already said this or I was zoned out, but the helipad at West Coast General Hospital is closing, and I didn't know if everybody was aware of that or not. Effective midnight on August 8th, the helipad at West Coast General Hospital will be closed in order to facilitate renovations to the ER. It's anticipated that the closure will last until December of 2022.
Wow.
So in lieu of that, we will have fixed wing at Alberni Valley Regional Airport, and there's a dude there on site 24 hours to open the gate should air evac be necessary and unable to go from there.
We do have two other helipads in Port Alberni and the Alberni Valley, but again in Port Alberni, so I don't know why they couldn't have transferred to them. Yes, Director Roberts.
Yeah, the question, why the Alberni Valley and not the Tofino Airport?
Sorry, so if anything was coming from, say, came out by, drove out by from Ucluelet to, or Tofino to West Coast General, and then had to fly to Tofino or fly to Victoria, they would do that from the Port Alberni area, and they can't do it from the helipad there. And depending on the crew and the auto launch and whatever helicraft are available, they very well could take a helicopter from somewhere else, from a high school field, for crying out loud, in Port Alberni. But the notification I have is that the next go-to would be fixed wing at the airport. Things are still status quo for flights out of Tofino, but usually flights out of Tofino are going directly to Victoria. If they fly from there, they're not stopping in Port Alberni.
Right, good to know. Alrighty, we'll chase that rabbit a bit. Alberni Clayoquot Health Network, Director Cote, I didn't forget. Whew.
Right, and we didn't have a meeting. We're shut down for this year.
I knew that. I was just kidding you. West Coast General Hospital. I actually emailed Mr. Lowe with regards to the status on the emergency room upgrades, and I did not get a response. Although I did see he responded to something else here today. That means he's in his office, but didn't respond to me, which I don't like too much, but I did try. Any other reports? Okay, so a motion to receive the reports. Director Roberts, Director Shannon, all in favor? Carried. Unfinished business, none. Late business, none that I know of. Question period, don't think we have anybody online.
No,
and
Mr.
Motion to adjourn. Director Roberts, Director Jack, all in favor? Over and out. Back to you, Director Jack. You're muted.
Oh, yes, thank you. Okay, So that brings us back to item 15. We've reconvened. And so now we will move in camera. I'll just read out for our benefit the motion to close the meeting to the public as per the community charter under section 91F, law enforcement, if the board considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the conduct of an investigation under or enforcement of an enactment.